All right, good evening, everybody. I come to you belatedly, but this is because I was doing some experimenting with my save file. Now I've not tested it in the game yet, so this may have some trouble. Let me also take a minute here. I think I should be okay. Um, but yes, I obviously am still struggling a bit in terms of start times and all of that. And I also am not fully better, um, but I'm going to try and do a full stream, keeping in mind, though, that there are some hard realities as far as the bedtime is concerned. So we'll see. As always, I'll do my best, but we'll see where things land. So let's open up Book of Hours. So what I have done here, I have two save files. This I'll maybe give some context in terms of the situation I find myself in. I very kindly was invited to be a beta tester for this. I don't know how helpful my testing was just because of how slow I play the game, but I do I do have one problem with this save, which is that the DLC has been released and, in fact, has been out for a while now. But what I am, how do I put this? So the DLC has been available for a while, but because I'm using the beta save, the Lighthouse Institute that I have is the one from the beta, which is not just missing the possibility of adding certain people to the role. It's actually it's missing the role of Secretary Persistent full stop. So this creates a couple of tricky parts. Now, one option I have is just to try and play the game as it was at as it's available to me. Of course, the challenge is that the game was also being developed while I was playing, so the options available within the game are greater than the ones that are in the Lighthouse. But the other thing that's true for this game, I think for Book of Hours, the intention here might have been, for Cultist Simulator, I think it's possible that the intention behind having the JSON files for the saves and all of that would be, and in fact most of the material in the game is in that. I have a feeling that might have been to sort of enable modding and such. At the very least, if you are inclined, there are a few things that you can do inside the game to just sort of mess around with it. And so now the game has also gotten quite a bit more complicated. Both Cultist Simulator and Book of Hours have gotten quite a bit more complicated, so the files aren't as straightforward to read as in some other cases. But what I tried to do here is to take the YouTube Lighthouse Institute and paste that into my Stream Institute. Now again, this has been a little bit of a last-minute job. There should be one called Fixed. Yeah, so Fixed should probably have a question mark. But I'm curious. Let's give this a shot. And it may sort of barf and be upset about it, but let's see what happens. Cool. All right. Everything is remembered. Hush House endures. Game loaded successfully. And look at that. The Curia of the Isle is long gone. Once it helped preserve a little knowledge and a kind of safety here in Brandkrug, and established the position of librarian. Rowena, Secretary Persistent of the Curia, a complex entity who has long protected Hush House, is both exhausted and compromised, and so it's time for the librarian to return the favor and establish a successor to the Curia. Help visitors to pursue their goals and develop their develop their agendas. When you've found 6 suitable candidates inspired by agendas, you can suggest they found an organization that's a worthy successor to the Curia of the Isle. So you'll notice here that we have a few more options. Our treasurers can be Fraser Strathcoyne, Coquelia Mirajibi, Daymare, and Magister Hokebald. Now, there is a small problem here in the sense that the version that I have in my save is also not the most recent one. So we have a little bit of knowledge here about Connie, right? I actually didn't appreciate that she would be the secretary nunciant, so that's an interesting problem. Um, but you'll see that there's more than one Connie here, and of course, it's not a really big secret in this playthrough, specifically because we have we have the option. Um, but this is the drawback, right? When there's two Connies, there's two different possibilities. And so I think it's possible some of these people may not have been options available to me, and that one of the changes, or basically at some point there was all of the potential candidates that was available, and I think that's since been fixed. But again, because the save that I have has the Lighthouse Institute as it is in my YouTube save file, I'm sort of stuck with what I've got. But again, I don't think there's any big surprises on this one. Let's say I think we're in pretty good shape. What I should probably do is just make sure that I'm going to keep all of the saves. So if I've wound up messing with something that is going to cause problems for the game later on, I'll still be able to revert back to this old version. But I'm happy that worked. I had wanted to try that for a while, and unfortunately, I just I find myself without a whole lot of time. The gaming. This is the funny thing. The gaming that I do. How's it going, Jay? I believe the way you have it pronounced is Tranky, but I think you said Che is fine. So, but yeah. Anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but yeah, the time that I have for gaming really is just the. It's really just the stream. So it's one of the reasons why I'm a bit later, is I was just sort of messing around with the files. I'm not very good at matching parentheses, so particularly in Notepad, because for some reason that's how I chose to use it. I actually don't know if I have Notepad++ on this. Notepad++, I think, will highlight the brackets. Anyways, it works. I'm happy. Did I give myself any to-dos? So we're halfway through spring. Excuse me. Okay, well, here's one thing that I can work on. So we've got Forge Edge, Rose Heart, Winter Sky Scale, and Knock. So Lantern would be one. I'm just trying to think of the other. Yeah. Well, also I work in Python a lot, so it's not that parentheses are, they're not absent, but the tabbing is a little bit more of a focus. I also wouldn't count as a software developer. I mean, I get by, but I don't. I don't pretend that I know. I don't pretend that I know that much. But yeah, it's just, and it's like the other things too. Like there's, I have a lot of sympathy for a certain set of problems. So like off by one errors, I have a lot of, I have a lot of sympathy for. I just tend to make them a lot. Okay, it looks like I've got some old to-dos on here, so I'm just going to erase that. Um, yeah, and the thing I've actually found, so I used to try to do a couple of coding things on stream, and I've also tried to do this on YouTube. And so one problem with YouTube is that in some cases it's actually been really helpful when like the person who made the library that I was working on watched the video, and had some like made some nice points, and then sort of after the fact sort of said, you know, thanks for doing this. This is actually some of the best feedback that I've gotten on this tutorial right now, and you know, I've got some ideas on how I can change it. I was like, oh, that's really cool. That wasn't quite like I wasn't intending the developer to get something out of that, but I'm glad that helped that way. It was really and sort of a commitment mechanism for me to work with, and then you know, hopefully somebody who maybe wanted to try something like that but sort of thought it's something that other people do. Like sometimes it's just nice to see somebody not just do it but like struggle with the stuff that maybe you do as well, and sort of understand that that can be part of the learning process. But the drawback behind it is I find like, so with Python's match function, I feel that something somewhat recent. But so all of the examples that are given for it are basically like, here's a way you can simplify your if-else. And clearly match is something different. But so many of the examples really do kind of treat it like that. And so this kind of led to a problem that I ran into. And later on in the series, I've sort of figured it out. But because it's a VOD, like for months after the fact, long after I've sort of figured this out, there are people of, you know, varying degrees of helpfulness explaining this problem. And it's like, I can't really fault them for wanting to be helpful, but I also kind of feel like there's a statute of limitations on this stuff. And it's a double-edged one. So the live one just doesn't work at all for me. So like in one sense, you know, I think I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but there was, it was something with like 256 values, and I sort of neglected the zero, right? So I think I'd said something like -128 to +128, and there's always the one guy, right, who's just gonna correct that, and it's not wrong to say that that's true. Like that is clearly a mistake if I'm claiming that, but unfortunately, just the little point scoring is so good at just throwing the substantive point off, especially because in that one I was just talking about is like, you know, I'm really only going to have a score of 100 either way on this thing. So, you know, I'll try and be thoughtful. Largely what I was trying to do with that was communicate. I worked a lot with a piece of software called Stata. Absolutely wonderful tool for working with statistics. And it has this really helpful function in it called compress. And so what it will do is, like, let's say that you make everything, you know, a 64-bit integer, just for the sake of the argument. What it'll do is it will look through all of your variables. So first of all, if you're going to do something that needs to be represented as a float, it will usually just automatically change it to that for you. But following that, what you can do is you can run compress. It'll take a look at sort of the largest and smallest of all of the different values for you, and it will it'll change it so that it has sort of the most appropriate data type. And then the nice thing about Stata is everything's sort of checked. So let's say that you square your value, whether you're replacing it or whether you're generating a new one, it's gonna, you know, it's going to resize it. You don't have like overflow errors or anything like that. So wonderful thing. I use it on all my Stata data sets, or, well, I can't really say that, like, that's more past tense now because I'm not spending $1,000 a year to use Stata. So, you know, like most people, I'll use Python. It's nice, it's friendly, its data libraries are good. You know, R is another option. I'm not as enamored of it. Don't dislike it. I dislike our users. They're too evangelical for their own good. But like just I get what I need done in Python. I'm very comfortable with it. Comfortable with pandas. I get what I need done, and if I need something specialized that's only available in R, I'll use R. But I tend not to find that I'm not working at the cutting edge where apparently some statistician has like made a library that's only available in R. So does what I need, and I'm happy with it. But the one thing that I do run and get caught by is because NumPy doesn't do the checks. If I take something that has had the compress command run on it in Stata, so you have all of these small data sets. If I then go and do something like square a variable, I am going to run into those overflows because that's NumPy operates in a different way. So that was just a chance. I was doing my usual stream thing. I'm talking like I do. So I was just sort of pointing out, this might be overkill, but because I have this background with Stata, I know that I'm only going to use, minus 100 to positive 100. So I'll use this one, and because the negative values do have a meaning in here, we're not going to do unsigned. We'll do signed and take a minute to explain what that means. And then again, that's when I make the 128 to 128 error, right? Of course, easy to forget 0. You move on. But clearly that's not really a problem that has any teeth because they're clamped at 100 one way or another. But again, instead of being able to just move on from that mistake, oh nope, somebody has to get their 2 cents in chat. Oh, okay, no, we're now gonna have a big thing about this. All right, let's make sure. Yep, okay, it's chance to sass the streamer. He's clearly a moron. Let's really make fun of him for that very common error. Okay, we're good now. No, okay, we want to keep going on this anymore. And at that point, it's just sort of like, okay, so if I want to. I think for that I was trying to do a small prototype of a game. I was thinking, the thing that makes working on a game interesting. Like obviously there's the work that you need to do to build it up. But obviously iteration and just being able, I guess people kind of call this flow or that, but like what you really want is just the ability to sort of get some stuff down, mess around with it, play around with it a little bit. And where you can, just get to that point where you're able to see how ideas work. And what I've learned is that, like, again, it's not wrong to say, like, clearly that I was mistaken on that. And especially if it's like a classroom setting, it would be good to make sure that people, that people understand that it was a mistake. But unfortunately, the way it translates to the stream is that just winds up being another point of friction to keep me from getting to that, that point where I'm able to sort of get into the realm of play and sort of mess around with it. So I haven't really found a way to crack that yet, which is one of the reasons why I've experimented a little bit with the YouTube stuff, but not live streams yet. Or at the very least, if I do live streams, I'd probably have to explain less, which means that it's not going to work out. I mean, and like I said, like I'm not a good developer, or I'm not like a seasoned or the sort of person who's in a position to like, I mean, anybody can have opinions. You don't need permission to, have an opinion for something. But I'm not in a point where, my particular quirks should be taken with anything more than just my personal biases or backgrounds or whatever. Because like I also have a weird background. Like in school, we did a class. I mean, UBC still does it this way, but like the first programming class is taught in Scheme, and it's because they want to. It's taught in Scheme because Gregor's teaching it, but the idea is that it's very easy to mistake the language for the programming. And if you learn a bunch of stuff in Scheme, or well, it's the base student language, so it's not even Scheme, it's like a sort of stripped down version for learning. Actually, it's Racket is specific. I know Racket and Scheme are two different things, but it's not even Racket. It's like I think it's called the base student language. I think then there's the intermediate student language, and you kind of keep moving up. But Scheme is usually the thing everybody can sort of agree with, and if they don't hear Scheme, don't know what Scheme is, it's like it's like a Lisp. So, but I figure most people are familiar with Scheme though because of the Wizard book. But anyways, long and the short of it is, you spend more time thinking about programs, and you think about breaking problems down into smaller parts. And the funny thing about this is, I don't know, because I did wind up TAing that course. I don't know how many students realize this, but I actually don't think it's a terrible way if you're going to wind up being somebody who makes programs with a lot of help from some kind of large language model, right? So you've got Copilot open. Let's not even say that it's some kind of like integrated version or something like that, but you've got your Visual Studio Code or whatever. You've got that set up in front of you. You've got Copilot in the other side, and essentially what you're wanting to do is like, okay, I'm going to get the basics down, and whenever I run into a problem, I'm going to ask Copilot to do the work for me, or to write the code or whatever. I'd argue that way of learning actually probably makes you well suited to work on a pipeline like that, because again, it's entirely about decomposing a problem into these smaller steps. And so if you can do that, right, then you can articulate to the AI tool what you want and integrate it. And of course, more importantly, because you're working with these very small discrete units, hopefully you are writing tests. Excuse me. But it's also a lot more likely that you're going to find out if the code isn't doing what you wanted it to do. So again, I'm certainly not advocating that this is a good way to write programs, and I know I've been informed in no uncertain terms that people have strong views about the use of large language models for things. But I do think it's a style of teaching that I am beginning to appreciate is actually, it can survive some reasonably large shifts in terms of how you're doing the work. And I think that's a really neat, I think that's a neat feature. Also, hello Zrogdri. I did see your message before, but I was sort of in the middle of it, so I wanted to get back to it. But you said you once made a mod for a game, Surviving Mars. You added a daily newspaper to the game. That actually sounds like a really neat idea. I didn't mind supporting it until people were begging for updates 4 or 5 years later. By that time, you'd forgotten how to even update things on your end. You didn't have the mod programs installed anymore. Yeah, no, that is a huge problem, especially too, like, people want to enjoy something, but you don't owe them anything. And like, it's good as long as it continues to be enjoyable for you. But obviously someone just discovered, like, Paradox is going to be making money off of Surviving Mars for years to come. You're not. So, I quite like Surviving Mars. But yeah, I've never had to deal with that. I'm sure if I made a mod, nobody would want to play it. So, but it's a shame to hear that. Although I kind of want to look for your paper now. Okay. Yeah, I will. Actually, if you can just give me a second, I'm going to write that down. All right, so almost half an hour in. I do actually owe you some gameplay. So one thing I just wanted to note, my to-do list was the old to-do list, so there isn't much going on. Also, I think my tablet might be, yeah. Sorry, running into looks like a hiccup with the VPN. Okay, I'm not going to let it do its thing. But yeah, so we talked about getting the Lighthouse Institute properly formed. So for those of you who didn't see this before, we've got the treasurer, who's now Mr. Fraser Strathcoyne, Kokil Amirajibi, Daymare, and Magister Hokabald. Secretary Salvant can now be Peter Ecdistis, Ellie... Oh, okay, I'm going to say that's probably a one that I shouldn't be looking at. Isan Fekri, Stanislav John Schaller, Lala Kaima, D.I. Douglas Moore, Azita Bukhara, and Arthur Thomas Moore for Secretary Vigilant. Our enigmatic candidates are Aaron Peel, Corso Reverti, Yvette Southey, Zachary Wakefield. Our Secretary Nunciant, Serena Blackwood, Olympia Bichet, Ibn Aladim, and Connie Lee. And then 2 Secretaries Persistent. So the Secretary Persistent, this is a brand new one that we wouldn't have seen from any of the other instances. The Secretary Persistent must not only be immortal, but must stand with 1 foot outside the laws of the hours, and so she must always be a Legion. So currently Rowena, but our options here are Mademoiselle Margot Matutine or Mrs. E. Echidna. She may not be... Actually, what would be hilarious is if we put Echidna and Arthur Thomas Moore on the Lighthouse Institute, but I'm going to save that for another time. So, it seems to me like I've got some free space. Sorry, I'm just trying to find where I put my... All right. Oh, yes. No, sorry. I was working out the aspects. So we've got knock. I just put down lantern. Do I have Grail? No, but I'm going to guess that Grail is probably oldest Grail. Do I have Moth? Nope. Excuse me. Heart? Yeah, we did do Heart. My Sky was the Nowhere Origin. Forge. We did do Forge. That was the first one, actually. First flower. Moon? No moon. And I don't think we did nectar. Edge? Okay, yeah, we did do edge. All right. So in terms of learning the determinations, Lantern, Grail, Moth, Moon, and Nectar. So it would seem to me that the... oh yeah, we're already reading it. Sun Disfigured. So I'm going to just quickly pause and unpause so I can see what I'm working on. Yeah, so there it is, the Sun Disfigured. We've got the Red Book of Brittany, so we're getting a memory from that. We are reading The Road to Janus. I've been reading fast because of this game. I've been reading Fasty throughout January. I've not been like going through it at the regular pace. I've just been I've been reading it I'm wondering if I just messed up my my to-do list. Anyways, I'm not going to worry about it. We're just going to plow ahead. But yeah, anyways, that is a direct result of Book of Hours having its influence on me. Now, I think one of the things that I want to do, I think the plan here was Douglas, Aaron, Schaller, Arthur, and Bichet. I'm actually going to try and have a little bit more variety in guests for the next few visits. All right. The sun disfigured, a scroll of anthropoderm parchment written in the golden ink called Uzalt. The author of the text calls herself the Elegabline. Sometimes she seems to be Sunset Celia, the watchman's name. Sometimes she seems to be Lady Tryphon, the Grail-Long. It is unclear whether these are separate entities or the same person. It may be unclear even to the writer. The flaws in the sun's plan are elucidated. The sun's plan itself is never entirely clear, but it is a project of some kind to enter, possess, or surrender to the glory, the pure light above the Mansus. This book suggests ways in which that plan might fail. So this we're going to use to take a look at some determinations. An afternoon spent profitably, reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers to the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. It is spring, and the landlady has served me a slice of her stargazy pie, with the pilchard heads poking cheekily through the hot crust. Excuse me. The Red Book of Brittany, a volume of ink lore gifted to St. Brendan's by Brian of Brittany, who was made Earl of Cornwall after the Norman conquest. The red flower lies heavy, but the roots of the watchman's tree are constant. The red flower is described as the temptation of suffering, but its suffering can apparently be allayed when the copper fruit is enspelled with nectar aspect alongside herbs and infusions techniques. A variant of the same approach, with the inks of power techniques outlined here, can gentle lethe into a great ink. Sorry, just taking a second here. So the reason I think I might have messed up my to-do list is... Oh, actually, we do have Sacralamea. Okay. I was just thinking, how do I know what I'm supposed to be leveling up? Opening the Sky, an unusual recording of Varro's Opening the Sky, composed for the coronation of the new king Henry VIII. Henry IX. The record bears the suppression stamp, Expunge. The first movement is soft, autumnal. The second unsettling, febrile. The third is bright, soaring, rapturous. The fourth movement is glassy, slithering, a tintinnabulous icicle rattle. The fifth returns to the theme of the third, bright and rapturous once again, but it is a choral movement. It becomes apparent, though, that these are much, much too pure and high to be human voices. They recall birdsong. They recall the sweep of the windswept sky, balloon turning black at the edge of the higher heaven, and they wrench the heart in a direction the Bureau does not permit. Traveling at Night, Volume 1, The Annotated Dream Journals of Christopher Lopley, sometimes called the only readable occultist, literate, entertaining, bewildering. The wood lies outside the walls of the Mansus. As any student of the histories knows, the Mansus has no walls. Lopley describes how he came to make repeated visits to a dream wood via what he calls silver dreams. Trying to think your way to the wood, he explains, is like thinking your way to being in love, but I did find a secret that helped. Singlefoot Songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices. Powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoots sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. The Kersham Portolan, a beautifully illustrated and heavily annotated portolan, a nautical atlas of ports and destinations. It quickly becomes clear that many of its destinations no longer exist, or never existed in the traditional sense, but the annotations remain fascinating. The routes to Noon, the Long Sanctuary across the Western Sea may remain viable. 2 pages have been gummed together. When teased apart, they reveal a route to Ye's Behind the Wave, marked in red and gold inks, with heavily underlined warnings. Here the final city, strike the hours, lest the earth and sky break open. Sorry, I just need 1 second. Okay. A wistful air, let it rise in head and heart. A half sorrowful music of half pleasant longing. Those Who Do Not Sleep, the Mystic Broadnax, discusses the origins of the Sister and Witch and of the Thunderskin. The Sister and Witch were born in two wombs, one poor, one rich, across the sea. The Sister was stronger in the aspect of heart, and so their survival was assured. The Witch was stronger in the aspect of Grail, and so they were not satisfied. When the Sister and Witch came west, the Red Grail permitted their ascension, but then grew jealous of their power. It lured a great musician into the ranks of its names and caused him to be reborn from blood as a heart hour, so that the Grail might maintain dominion there also, but its victory is not assured. Traveling at Night, Volume 2, the annotated dream journals of Christopher Alopoli, sometimes called the only readable occultist, literate, entertaining, bewildering. There is an extensive discussion of the comparisons between Allopoli's own dreams and those of the Emperor Elagabalus, who Allopoli regards as a dupe or avatar of the sun in rags. The white is west of the world, Allopoli remarks, and winter does not wait forever. Elagabalus found his way to the White Door at last, thankfully. Speech can't pass the White Door, and honestly, Elagabalus never had anything very interesting to say. I tried to follow in his footsteps, but I never learnt enough of the White. I suppose I'm thankful for that too, but here's what I do know. And the Lake Fusino recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine marshes, the wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. These are the songs that the sister sang to the witch, that the Thunderskin roared to the sky, the songs with which the Dwendrazones of the Mansis keep their vigil. Once heard, they are not forgotten. Okay, and then we have leveled up Rhyme and Remembrance, to speak with the dead, to torment the living, to celebrate both. So it seems to me like the first thing I should do here is find out what I want to level up the Sacralamea with. I think Sacralamea itself was going to be one of the skills I leveled up. So yeah, and Resurgences and Emergences got one as well. Excuse me. So let's see if I have what it takes. I don't think you're supposed to be there, but okay. Actually, it's easier if I just use the... Alright, so... this might work. Not as well as I wanted, but... I would be tempted to use the sun's weakness at this point, but I know I'm going to have Moth for something else, so I'll use the occult scrap. At last, I am something of an authority in this. Improve this skill to level 6. So, Beguiling, Melody, Gossip, Impulse, and Satisfaction. I suppose the other way of thinking of this is I'm going to be leveling up Sacralamea and Watchman's Paradoxes. Actually, okay, before I do anything else, let's get some determinations down. So, I don't know if... I guess Grail and Lantern would work here, but not Moth. So Tradisma Hyra is the best Grail that I've got. I think it's Maricat is the... yeah. And unsurprisingly, the Grail one is Make a Determination, Grail Oldest. Sorry, I'm just bringing my list up. Okay, so Oldest... The Red Grail gives life, the Grail takes life, the Grail is not sated. The Grail, who disdains contradiction, is the oldest hour that persists. Any that seem older are subsumed eventually in the Grail's tides. Adds Grail and Nectar to your journal, replaces any other oldest determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. So Grail and Nectar. So next up, I'm going to take a look at... my lantern isn't as sharp as it could be right now. But we'll make do. That's really frustrating, actually. I'm gonna go... I'm actually gonna restore the... Actually, you know, I'm kind of curious what the result is, but Lantern isn't one of those things that I can... that has a special magnate one, so I won't bother restoring the Faust after all. But the glorious origin. Our first sparks of self descended from the light above the world, which we call the glory. Without the glory, we would be beasts in darkness, and the gifts of our past illuminate our future, which is eternity. Adds Moth and Lantern to your journal, replaces any other origin determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. So, origin, Lantern, and Moth. Oh, sorry, Moth first, then Lantern. Okay, so let's take a look and see what Moth gives us. That book is spoken for. I'll confess, I'll be a little surprised if there's just the one Moth. No, sorry, Caller's Desk has Moth. Okay, solutions and separations. Trist. This should also be an result task. Yep. And I shall not conceive a Mothy riddle. I will, however, make a determined... Oh! The city forever unbuilt. This history is my last and greatest work. The city so long dreamt of will never be built. The sun will not touch it. Eternity cannot take it. All right, Moth oldest. The moth beats within the skull, seeks among the trees of the wood, is dappled. The moth who delights in contradiction is the oldest hour that remains. Any that seem older, the moth once was, when once it was. Adds Moth and Lantern to your journal, replaces any other oldest determination. Adding determinations to your journal first makes it possible, then easier to write a matching history. Okay. So just two more. Let me just take a look here. I'm looking for for Moon and Nectar. So loopholes will give me Moon, but no Nectar. Weaving the World will give me Moon and Nectar. As will the Great Counterfeit, actually. So the first job will be to take the sun's weakness and use that in crafting. But before I do that, let's think about... So I'm going to put something into Sacrolamea and Watchman's Paradoxes. So that is Sky, Moth, and Lantern. Whistle do. Okay. Confounding Parable will get me Sky. I don't recall which of these we were on to. So I'm just going to start from the beginning again. Core. So Revelations, obviously, I think I might be on to each flame as fuel now. I guess I don't need to worry about the satisfaction again because it's not relevant anymore. Regrets, no. Salt, no. Foresight does give me Lantern. I don't remember how far we were on this. Maybe High Traditions of the Noble Endeavor? We've already got Solace. Intuitions doesn't help. Excuse me. Fear doesn't. We've got the storms. We already have the impulses. This should be gossip. And contradictions. Yeah, so none of those are what I need. So what I'll do from there, I will sorry, I'll recover the Beguiling Melody. And I think that's it. I have 2 desks that are unused, plus the phonographs, but I think that's what we've got for the memories right now. I'll, if I run out, I'll... Actually, it's not even a question of running out. I will read the paper to get the occult scrap. And then sooner rather than later, I'd like to use the sun's weakness in some kind of crafting, but we'll see where we stand once once everything else is settled. The skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. Okay, so let's go take the paper. I'll use the core on this one just because I have more than one, so investigate the object. You won't use this up or consume it by doing this. And let's take a minute here. Okay, yeah, everything's in order. So I'm going to need 12 memories in total for the Sacralamea and Watchman's Paradoxes. And then, of course, we've got other books which are going to be finishing reasonably soon, but I'll work with what emerges. We are kind of at the end of the day, so I can't expect everything to be done today. Okay, the Green Jasper tablet, supposedly copied from a tablet of Green Jasper, which serves as the covenant stone of the Monastery of the Fifth Cup, the token which gives that library shelter beneath the Watchman's Tree. Humankind hid itself from the glory's light in the roots of the Watchman's Tree, but for every chink we stuffed with cloth and hair, we opened another, and the light crept in, until we looked, below into nowhere, and the eye of the mare in the tree winked red. The tablet expounds the dangers of inviting the in the Nowhere Hour called the Mare in the Tree, and also of forbidding her entry, since she can never be entirely be denied. Along the way, it reveals the secret of the sacrament malachite, in which the Merry Mare merrily spits, brewed with the rites of the roots from the Pneuma pear in the presence of sufficient nectar aspect. The Road to Janus, Thlimian Burzgash makes a series of prophecies regarding the initiates of the House of Silence, with intricate, if unhelpful, predictions on their passage through the house. The sixth initiate is Priest and Key, Gate and Church. He shall cross the sea and open the tide. He shall not be the 11th, yet there shall there be 7 between them. In the first year of his time, the flower door is opened. The 12th initiate is Salvation and Rack, Steed and Rider, who chooseth one blossom of 3, who casteth away the key, and whom the key shall not cast away, who comes after the flame and before the snow. Now... Oh right, this is the first time I'm reading this. So I'll have to figure out what I'm doing with door and wall, but let's, excuse me, deal with the rest. We'll make money with that. The other line, one of Samuel Savage's more thoughtful works, an allegorical play about the city Clarity, a city which is also a book, and the sentences which inhabit it. The Lord's Proverbial and the Lord's Disquisitional war in the streets of Clarity, while the punctuants get drunk on ink and supply the jokes, though by Savage's usual standards there aren't very many jokes. The final act sees the Lord's Proverbial unsealing the city Clarity's gate to expel the population into the unknown. The formula that they use for the unsealing is a real one. It can be used with knock and preliminal meter to create a gate sign of power. The High Traditions of the Noble Endeavor, a blandly positive work on the Endeavor Club, published by the Endeavor Club. The club was founded in 1862, but claims to draw from much older traditions. Club members are assigned names out of noble myth, Joffrey, Roland, and unexpectedly Breadbettle. They claim to be heirs to the Leashed Flame, which gave the island of Britain such appalling power in some histories. Their endeavor itself is a purifying fire which makes its fuel something more than human. This transformation, however, is no longer encouraged by the club, and perhaps, the work is coy on this, no longer permitted. The Geminiad, Volume 3, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty, and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language foreseen is much older. Coral decorates its cover, and its page edges are sharp enough to slash a throat. These pages outline the nature and the doctrines of an hour that demands the union of what has been separated, an hour that is sought at the water's edge and beneath the moon, the witch and sister. The language is elusive, enigmatic, intricate. It'll take some untangling. The third volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the witch and sister has been known to manifest as the sister and witch, and that this face may heal while the other face is always hungry. It implies connections between the witch and sister and the hours of the wood, especially the secret keeper called the Velvet, but it is ambiguous on whether the witch and sister is a wood hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, the sadness that remains from their time as flesh. Finally, Each Flame Has Fuel, a work by Omar the Blaze, an initiate or craftsmaster at the Labyrinth of Lions. Omar describes his work in the construction of mirrors for the enclosure of a sacred flame and his slow realization of a flaw in the glass. Omar explains how his lightsmithing techniques can be used, in the presence of sufficient lantern, to enrich xanthotic essence into the great ink of the first history, but he pleads caution in its use, lest the chandler be realized. Also, I completely forgot, so I know Omar is sort of sent to the he's got his what is it, his it's not exile, but he has to do a penance at the lighthouse. The focus of Omar the Blaze spent 7 years manning a lighthouse in Tyre in atonement for his extinguishing of a sacred flame. So for some reason I completely missed this detail. Omar describes his work in the construction of mirrors for the enclosure of a sacred flame. So There's definitely a story there. All right, let's see what I can do with Sacralamea, and I'm going to want to prioritize the moth here. So the impulse, Sun's weakness. I don't think it would hurt to use the occult scrap. All right, when I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. So Watchman's Paradoxes is next, so let's just work out the plan for that. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we're actually good to go with Sacralamea. So I suppose the question after is, if I've got door and wall, what do I want to level up? I'm actually going to start making some notes on that. It's interesting to consider that all of this writing was done one paragraph at a time, and so yes. So every once in a while, either in a blog or in a response to an AMA on Reddit, you'll get a little bit of an idea of the writing process behind this. So for some of it, it's just a bunch of cards laid out on the table. So this is detail that came out from one of the writing retreats, because they mentioned the challenge that owning cats creates. But yeah, actually, okay, tell you what. I know this has been a very chatty one, but I think this will be an interesting essay to read. So I am going to take a small break. And actually, you know what? Vesper Fortune made some wonderful art, which I did not yet integrate into the stream. So you're going to have to go with the old-fashioned be right back sign. I'm going to take a minute here. I'm going to refill my tea. I'm actually also probably going to get a glass of water as well. And out of curiosity, Che, have you read the lead designer, Alexis Kennedy? He's got an essay on world building, which I think is a really neat one. It's actually contained in the book of essays. I'll be sure to give a link for that later. But okay, yeah. I think because we're talking about method, I think this would be a good time to read that essay. But I'm going to get myself some refreshments. I'm going to have an early break, and then we will be back to hear the author's thoughts on this process. So I will see you all in a little bit. Now would be a good time to have a stretch and maybe get a glass of water yourself. I will be back as soon as I can. All right, thank you everybody for your patience. I've got some tea in front of me. So I feel like if I'm going to be reading this, so this article is available on gamesindustry.biz, which is going to be where I'm reading it. But I feel like I should mention there are a couple of books that are available through Weather Factory. This particular essay is available with a number of other essays called Against World Building and Other Provocations. Now, I have a physical copy, which I got from the Etsy shop, but I noticed that the Etsy link no longer has, like, if you click on that link, it says the item is unavailable. So I don't know if this means that they're just restocking, or if they're just not, they don't have physical copies anymore. However, you can go on Amazon. It's making me do a CAPTCHA. But this is available both as a paperback and in a Kindle edition through Amazon, if you are the sort of person who is willing to buy from Amazon. But in any case, so again, I feel this is still fair to do because it is still available on gamesindustry.biz. I should mention, for those of you looking for things that are completely new, there is also another book that Weather Factory's put out called The Snare of the Tree and Other Perilous Seductions, and this is sort of an essay on game design, or it says here essays on the dangers of game design, which I think is actually quite an interesting read itself. That I won't be doing on stream just because, you know, it isn't a publicly available text. So I sort of feel like if people want to get the knowledge from that, they should probably pay for it. So that's capitalism. Let me just bring up the display capture. Oop. Sorry, just a second. And just for those of you who might be joining us between the break and when we, or between now and when this first came up, Che made a point about the connection that, again, I've played this game a few different times, but I hadn't recognized that Omar. So I'd read The Focus of Amber, and I'd read, oh God, the one that I just read, the one that gives the lightsmithing. But I'd never, for some reason, I don't think I'd ever made the connection that, yeah, it was the fact that I knew that he had extinguished a sacred flame, but I did not realize that he was also involved in construction of a chamber that was to keep a sacred flame. So anyways, Against World Building, why Alexis Kennedy wishes we didn't use the word. World building. You read it all the time in reviews. A triumph of world building. A masterpiece of world building. I'd like to see more of the world building. I wish we didn't use the word. I've started to be suspicious of it, and I want to persuade you to be suspicious of it too. If you know anything about my work, that'll seem perverse, I know. Half the reviews of Sunless Sea and Fallen London praise the world building, even when the reviewer wasn't so keen on the game, and I'm off to work for BioWare next week. But my problem isn't with the concept, it's with the word we've come to use for the activity of creating story settings. That word drags at the activity like a homicidal small child hanging on a steering wheel until we swerve off the road into a snowbank. You hear world building and you think big, you think physical, you think encyclopedic. It implies the literary equivalent of reverse Vogons, huge architect ships moving continents into place until you've got a planet, which actually sounds amazing. What's wrong with that? Here's an exercise. Don't worry, it'll take less than 10 seconds. For 9 seconds, think about the people you'd associate most with world building, the people who've had the most influence on the whole discipline and approach in the 20th century, the people you'd probably quote if you were going to give a lecture on the topic. Okay? Okay. For most of us, a certain Oxford professor of Anglo-Saxon is going to be pretty high on that list. Lord of the Rings is to world building what vertebrae are to mammals, in European culture at least, and maybe globally. You don't need vertebrae to make a mammal, but that's what we ended up with. We've all got them, and now they're part of the whole mammal deal. Its influence filters into everything, and one of those things people know about Lord of the Rings is that it's got whole invented languages and 5,000 plus years of invented history. Having an invented language or thousands of years of history doesn't hurt the vitality or appeal of a fictional world, but they're rather beside the point, and that's my problem with the idea of world building. You can find any number of well-intentioned world-building guides which say menacingly something like, start with a map and a timeline. This is probably Tolkien's fault, but it isn't what Tolkien would have wanted. His attitude to world building, which he sometimes called subcreation or secondary creation, was summarized in a piece called On Fairy Stories. It's really good. Google it. It's so good that I think we can honestly forgive him for going completely over the top with spelling. Not just fairy, F-A-E-R-Y, which I rather like, not even fairy, F-A-E-R-I-E, but actually F-A-E with an umlaut, R-I-E. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, Lord of the Metal Umlauts. Parenthetically, I'm not just talking about fantasy in the strict sense. All this applies to mass media SF. It doesn't to Stanislaw Lem or Greg Egan being cerebral, but Mass Effect or No Man's Sky or Elite Dangerous are fairy stories, which is fine. I only mean that they're a particular kind of delicious escapism that riffs off people's expectations, and though Tolkien might have been a cantankerous old technophobe, everything he says applies to SF fairy stories too. Here's what Tolkien has to say. The realm of the fairy story is wide and deep and high and filled with many things. All manner of beasts and birds are found there. Shoreless seas and stars uncounted. Beauty that is an enchantment and an ever-present peril. Both joy and sorrow sharp as swords. In that realm a man may, perhaps, count himself fortunate to have wandered, but his very richness and strangeness tie the tongue of a traveler who would report them. And while he is there, it is dangerous for him to ask too many questions, lest the gates should be shut and the keys be lost. My emphasis. Or in this case, Alexis's emphasis. Tolkien didn't build a language or make a timeline because it would create joy or sorrow as sharp as swords. He built a language because he was a philology nerd who loved languages, and then he put it in his invented world, which you remember because the world was full of memorable sights and thematically aligned stories and teasing hints about something greater. He made a timeline and revised it, I don't know how many times, but only because later on he wanted to make all the things he'd written hang together. And we all need these things to hang together, especially if we're building franchises that might end up with legions of fans and internet continuity arguments and wikis. And one way to make these things hang together is dates, king lists, invented languages, and lots of maps. But these things aren't the core of secondary creation. They're plumbing. I wouldn't want to live in a building without plumbing, but I wouldn't want to visit a building where the architect had sat down at his desk and said, excuse me, said, okay, this building is all about the plumbing. And invented worlds, even MMOs, even EVE Online, are worlds that we visit, not worlds where we live. Whatever we need, we never need to visit the toilet in an invented world. If you want to read more about toilets and games, and who doesn't, there's a column on that topic right here. This does not mean that invented worlds don't need to feel consistent. Let me say that again without the double negative because it's important. Invented worlds should feel consistent, but an invented world can be consistent and detailed and very, very dull. Game developers are not the only ones to get hung up on the importance of plumbing, but in my experience we get more hung up on it than most. I think one reason is that we increasingly expect our audience to engage. I think another is that we simulate our worlds, and when you simulate a world you tend to think about concrete details. But whatever the reason, the result of this is that again and again I start up a promising game and as it opens, I have to sit through an info dump cutscene about basically Sauron being defeated by basically the Last Alliance, or an info dump on the 3 different quasi-Renaissance city-states and their rivalries. I can't easily express the sense of despair I feel when I realize I have to absorb all this and worry about whether there's going to be a test on it in a dialogue tree somewhere later. This is not a complaint about lack of innovation. It's basically impossible for anyone to innovate interestingly. When we call a setting innovative, we mean it's more different than the others, and so by definition, most settings won't be innovative. If anything, it's the reverse. Distinctiveness, poignancy, emotional power, consistent art direction, faithfulness to theme, these are all important. Innovation per se isn't. Tolkien again. Fantasy is made out of the primary world, but a good craftsman loves his material, and has a knowledge and a feeling for clay, stone, and wood, which only the art of making can give. It was in fairy stories that I first divined the potency of the words and the wonder of the things, such as stone and wood and iron, tree and grass, house and fire, bread and wine. I just invented a world. It's run by a nation that has 11 emperors. The nation's under attack by a race of 4-armed red-skinned bipeds who have electricity powers. Travel through the empire is exclusively by canal, with narrow boats drawn by steam horses. The culture is vaguely Russian. Magic only works when it's raining. Food is traditionally eaten raw. That's nothing like anything else out there, but I doubt you'll remember any of it tomorrow. It doesn't connect to anything, and it doesn't connect to itself. I've chosen a deliberately jarring set of ideas, but the effect is the same when the game is set in not Vienna, because it's got ice magicians, under attack by not the Turks, because they ride zebras. If it's basically the Turks and basically Vienna, riff off them directly, or hell, just set it in Vienna. If it's something else, work out what that something else is and put it front and center. If your world is no more complicated than these are the enemy, this is why you care, then you don't need to invent centuries of detailed history. If the world is more complicated, then great. You sure as hell need to focus on the reasons why the player should negotiate the complexities. It's easy to write a timeline. It's hard to make a timeline interesting. We're stuck with world building as a term. It's bedded in, and one grumpy column by one mid-ranking games writer isn't going to start a revolution. But next time you hear it, remember that the quality of a story's setting is measured not on its expansiveness, but its distinctiveness. Tolkien, as usual, has the best words, and don't you admire how he finds a way out of all those commas when the sentence really should pile up at the end like a drugged centipede? It is the mark of a good fairy story, or of the higher and or more complete kind, that however wild its events, however fantastic or terrible the adventures, it can give to child or man that hears it, when the turn comes, a catch of breath, a beat and lifting of the heart, near to, or indeed accompanied by, tears, as keen as that given by any form of literary art, and having a peculiar quality. Think for a moment about the worlds you've loved in games. Every one of them will have a moment with that quality. It might be scavengers playing acoustic guitar around a fire. It might be the way backstory clicks into place. It might be the emotional undertone of an invented proverb. It might be the tilt of a ringed planet against the night. But it won't be a timeline. So I think that's quite a good essay. I've actually realized I did prior to reading to buying the book. Actually, when I kind of got into Cultist Simulator, I saw that there were a couple of essays by Alexis Kennedy, and I sought them out. So I'm pretty sure I'd read everything that was in the book before I bought it. But I don't know, I got it as a 2-book set. I got the signed edition. So all right, so Chase says, dude, that's interesting. The reader player can only learn what you share with them, and it doesn't matter if you come up with it in the moment or build it separately. It only matters if it's intriguing and relevant. Yeah, so I mean, there is there has been some discussion in the subreddit and just kind of on updates when he's going off to do some kind of writing retreat or whatever. So there is definitely sort of a set of cards that are put down. I know because I was a Kickstarter backer for Cultist Simulator, there's actually a USB stick with sort of an Excel sheet of all of the relationships between the different entities in the world. So, I would not want to I don't want to suggest that this is like all purely improvised. I think that would be that's probably taking it to a little too far in the other direction. But I really do like how the essay focuses on sort of the really important, some of the really important features, and the ones that I think maybe don't always. I'm trying to think of a better way to put this, but like, I like how it. I like how it takes the thing that a lot of people like, right? So like people like world building, people like the things that it gives them. But I think it does a much better job of explaining why it works, as opposed to these homework assignments of, you just need to write, 5,000, 5,000 different characters over the different generations, and that'll be how you get it um, get it to work. That's going to be how you get your new fans or whatever. I don't know. Like I think it's a neat. I think it's a neat. Well, one, it's a neat essay, and then number two, I think it's a. I think it's neat to hear someone who has made worlds that people really do like talk about specifically making them distinct. No. I don't think that's a bad way of. I don't think that's a bad way of putting it, Che. So it's like I think one of the it's not maybe the example that I'd pick at the top. But I actually think the example where it's like it's not Vienna because it's got ice magicians, you know, they're not the Turks because they ride zebras. I actually think that that's a really good example because it sorry, I'm still getting over being sick, and I'm trying to be as clear as I can on something that I don't like. I'm not somebody who's going to write I'm not somebody who's going to be able to write this well. But yeah, I guess the big thing that I like about it is it kind of gets back to that core point that really any story, even if it's a very conventional story of, like, you know, make people care, right? You've got a character, they want something, you want them to achieve that thing that they're looking for. And the sub-creation, the world building, those are all tools that will help you achieve that, and they will give you other interesting things to point to. But I really do like how it gets the attention back onto like the story and the character are the important thing. Or maybe sorry, I probably shouldn't be emphasizing story and character that much. I do like how it sort of recenters the attention. I think the main reason for this is that it's very easy to give advice on this sort of stuff, right? So if you like reading Lord of the Rings, even if you've never written a story before, it's very easy for people to say, oh yeah, you know, just write a few thousand years of timeline. That's what Tolkien did. But it's, again, the hard thing is that you have to care. So yeah, I don't know if the article has anything specific in terms of the time, or well, you should just make it interesting in the moment. I mean, it's essentially when you say in the moment, I mean, I'm just taking that as a function of all of the work that's gone into the story prior to that. But no, I don't necessarily think you had a bad approach to it. Anyways, I just like that essay. It's a nice essay to share. So hopefully I didn't butcher it too much with the stumbling commentary afterwards. Good gracious. I unpaused, but I didn't work out what I wanted to do with my door and wall. No problem. I'm glad you found it interesting. And again, for those of you who are interested in that essay, that is available in both online on gamesindustry.biz, but also there is a collection of essays from the same author available on the Weather Factory website. Okay, let's do Great Signs and Great Scars. So I'm going to need 5 Knock and Grail. I think that's realistically the only one that I can get away with. So I've already got the pattern here. I think we read... I think we can do Matters and Deeds of Serpents. Okay, so that is 3 of what I need. And 5 somewhere. Excuse me. I'm not using this for the I don't want the confounding parable for the upgrade, but I do want to use that overnight. Okay, satisfaction will do. Oh, we did that. Or actually, I don't think we did. Okay, and sorry, just one more second, please. All right. So it's going to take a minute for the... it's going to take a minute for sort of the memories to generate here, so I'm going to take the 30 seconds to read the newspaper again. And then tomorrow, I think we'll probably finish the Door and Wall, and then I think we have enough time to read at least 1, maybe 2 more books. Alright, the skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. So yeah, we'll have 2 from... excuse me. 2 from Door and Wall to read. Oh, there's one other book I should be reading. And that is... Was it Loopholes I was going to read? Yeah, because that's got Moon and Moth. Or, well, Loopholes is the result, but... that won't do. Delude, how you doing? Sadly, I have. I've actually had it for a while. I missed a couple of days of streaming, but I didn't I don't want to miss too many days. So I am, for better or worse, working on my. Hang on. Yeah, this should do. For better or worse, I'm doing my stream. But it's wonderful to see you. How are you doing? You were working on something that I'm trying to remember. I think you were... It was a cosplay outfit. It was for Shea Gorath. I think you were on track to be finished now, if I'm not mistaken. Hope you recover faster than I have. Make sure you drink plenty of tea. It helps with the congestion. Yes, thank you. I also need to get a little bit better at having proper bedtimes. That is an ongoing struggle, but I'm doing my best. I also don't want to cut the streams too early on these things. All right. But yeah, so we're going to get the... Yeah, also, sorry, I was wrong. It wasn't Loopholes I was looking for. It was The Great Counterfeit. Sorry, I can't remember if I worked that out properly. All right, an afternoon spent... excuse me. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers to the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. You're hoping to have a near complete... Excuse me. You were hoping to have a near complete version done by March when you might have a chance to actually meet Wes Johnson in person. That sounds very, very cool. So yeah, you're about to start your next iteration on it. You still have to embroider the front panel and add some detailing to the sleeves. That's cool. Are you going to show it off on stream at all when you get around to it, or is that something that you're just leaving for your own, for the real world? All right. So there is my cold scrap. Nothing's history when it first happens. Oh, very nice. I'm looking forward to that. I know you've been working very hard on it. And actually, this is a nice little transition for me. For those of you not familiar, Daily Daybreak was very kind to host me when the Rift of the Necrodancer demo came out. So as for recent news, the semester just started. You're so excited to be back. I didn't know you were studying. So, but Delude was somebody who originally kind of came through Rift of the Necrodancer, and obviously I'm a huge fan of Brace Yourself games. But on top of that, I got a chance to watch Delude stream. And I got to watch Morrowind and Oblivion, which I've really enjoyed doing a run as the sort of same Dunmer from the very first Elder Scrolls game, Arena. Now, I will spare you the voice because I'm pretty sure that will just destroy me tonight. But yeah, it was nice to just see such a nice alignment of games that I've really enjoyed doing and see Delude do them so well. So definitely a wonderful broadcaster and somebody I recommend checking out if you get a chance. And of course, we've got Sheogorath cosplay to look forward to in the future. On Matthias and the Amethyst Imago, Loss, an account of an occult romance. A certain Para, son of Aaron, claims to have written this in a single night as part of his initiation into the Damascene branch of the House of Leith, that order of immortals who rejected their past and future. The laws of the house forbade Matthias to love, the customs of the wood forbade the Imago to remain. So he conjured her a final time, when she had uncovered the shears of Alcapura, and she suffered him to cut the wings from her back, so that she might remain, and he suffered her to cut the parts which hold man's seed, to keep them from the detestable act. This was love in all its blood and joy. We've cast Matthias from the house. In the cradle of the roots, Matthias and the Imago left their names, and though their names were lost, they found their name-day riddles. We recall this in Solution and Separation, so that in the presence of the moth our memories may become our futures. Do this wisely in memory of the name and the long who gave up their past, that they might be together forgotten. You got into a course with one of your favorite professors this semester. Might have a chance to finish your work on your mechatronic Ori. Oh, that's very cool. And you're going to get to use manufacturing methods and make an electric guitar. Yeah, that is well... I was going to say, I loved school, but I was very, so my major was always in the social sciences. And I wanted to make sure that my breadth was more than just ticking boxes. So I did make sure that I did some things that were outside of my comfort zone. In fact, doing, excuse me, computer science was actually something that I was interested in, but was far from in my wheelhouse. So that would be one example of something that I did. But even I took a data structures and algorithms course as well. You don't do that if you're just learning to do a little scripting. But the one thing that I didn't really get a good grip on would be any of the anything where I kind of get to make stuff, right? Make stuff in the physical sense, right? But that sounds like a lot of fun. So I was scared for a moment that I had taken the wrong aspect. On the Matter and Deeds of Serpents, this was probably the Prophecies of the Naga rendered into English and illustrated by William Midnight in Paris in the 1880s, but it shows a number of divergences from that text. It's certainly quite recent by the standards of VAC texts. The serpent folk, called the Great Hooded Princes, came to know the order called the House of Leith and warred across the miles with them. They made an alliance with the Mother of Ants, whose children they had been. The text describes how the Great Hooded Princes escaped, or will escape, from the Fifth History, where they had died, or were doomed to die. They engaged in a secret conquest of the land of the Great River, called India in some histories, and have ensured that all other conquests of that land are false conquests. That's really great. I'm glad. I'm really happy. I mean, it's always nice to see you stop by daily, but other than the illness, this sounds like it's all great news. The Wind's Ruin, the second volume of the Meditations of Abbot Thomas of the Abbey of the Black Dove. Abbot Thomas speaks of his time as a raider when his name was not Thomas but Toke, scything the sea, striving for plunder. Abbot Thomas clearly regrets his storm years, and much of the book is taken up with his thoughts on penitence, but there are hints that he also misses those years and the companionship of his sword brother, ship brother, Trygive. Two Wombs, One Heart, a fanciful account by Thirza Blake of the early life of the twins, their time as mortals before they became hours or even long in a dry kingdom beyond the Western Sea, which Thirza suggests might have been ancient Mexico. It is widely known that the sister was rich and the witch poor. It is widely known that the witch loved the sister first. It is not widely known that the witch was first employed to teach the sister the arts of embroidery. Although Thirza is very probably just making up much of the story, there are long passages expounding notable techniques of weavework and thread fight. In particular, when the witch and sister flee across the sea to be together, Thirza explains how they fashioned a peace weave with Heart and these arts, and then, to tame the winds, called on Heart again to swaddle the thunder in the peace weave. And 108, Ava de Wolf discourses on the Fifth History, and particularly on those who are said to have passed over from it, the Great Hooded Princes, the Knocklong, who ascended under the Mother of Ants, but now, so Ava claims, honor the Horned Axe. The Great Hooded Princes call their library the Tomb of Lies, and this has given rise to a foolish tradition that the princes are habitual liars. Of course, in fact, truth flourishes when lies are slain. On the other hand, the princes do not say knowledge is power, but rather power is knowledge. Ava has, to her regret, never visited the library. She notes that it is said to be west of the Lion and north of Victory, and suggests that although the princes are generally associated with India, their library might be further east. I'd be fascinated by your professor. He's fascinated by philosophy surrounding music and time, and much of his engineering work seeks to reach into other disciplines. Yeah, that is definitely the sort of thing I'm interested in. I definitely feel that the most interesting work, either that I did or that I read, tended to be informed by other disciplines. And I think really the reason for that is, I think econ gets accused of this a lot, although my experience has usually been the opposite. But basically, if you get too siloed in your thinking, it doesn't mean that you can't do good work, but it does mean that you're leaving a lot of opportunity sort of just lying on the table. And in some cases, basically this is maybe not a cause, but it's definitely a symptom of a more sort of rigid kind of thinking. So that I always found helpful in terms of sort of working out some ways that I might be able to just find interesting ideas. But also the reason why I originally went to university was philosophy. I didn't take as many courses as I would like, just because, there's only so much time in a timetable. But yeah, there's a little perk. Oh my goodness. I messed up a little bit on my timing, but that's fine. We'll make this all work. Or will I? Yeah, I think... all right. Sorry, I'm all over the place here, but at last I'm something of an authority in this. But yeah, no, I always tend to find, well, number one, like it's always interesting to be working on something that is off the beaten track. So inevitably this winds up meaning sort of working across disciplines or working on, I mean, sometimes it's fun to just work on things that people think are completely nuts. But on the other hand, too, like the other thing that I think makes this really interesting is if you think about it, like the whole idea of something, intangible like music being combined with engineering. I mean, I first of all really like electronic music, and this could be this could even be switched on Bach, right? It doesn't just have to be dance music, and that's very clearly a combination of the two. And of course, pianos are like, unless you happen to have, I don't know, a lithography machine. Like people don't really have pianos in houses anymore. There usually be electronic ones, but like once upon a time, the most complicated piece of machinery in a house would be a piano. Like these things aren't just willed into existence by chance. So there's probably a lot of rich material to work on in there that, again, because it's not my background, I can't necessarily fully appreciate. But it sounds like you are in heaven right now. All right. So yeah, I may lose the whist in the morning, and I may be short on, I don't know, it's really just the whist. I'll probably just regenerate it with the sixpence, but... Interesting. All right, so I'm just gonna have a sip of tea because my chatting is getting in the way. All right, the Shiridic Book of Sons, a radically different text from any of the other versions of the Book of Sons attributed to Hagar, Queen of Shur, Mother of Wolves. Set down with reverence before the intercalate by one who understood what would come to pass. Apocryphal chapters foretell the means by which, the Sun in Splendor and the Forge might circumvent the impossibility of their joining through proxies which are in some sense themselves. Excuse me. You want to emphasize, I don't think I would have pushed forward into grad school without this professor's guidance. He is why I want to become a professor. That's very, very nice to hear. And it's hard. I didn't find a master's overwhelming. And I think, honestly, if I had a better idea of what I needed, so money was the largest reason I didn't pursue a PhD. I think if I had a slightly better understanding of my options and how it would work out, I probably would have pursued a PhD, because I really do like teaching. But I'm also quite happy with where I am right now. So, but like I definitely remember spending a lot of time in the different labs and with a bunch of different work, talking with people. Like I'd go to every single seminar I could. And I'm definitely well aware of the effort that it takes. But I also know the thing that got me through school and would have, I'm sure, gotten me through the PhD is just really loving the subject. And very often a good teacher will be sort of the thing that that lights that fire. So yeah, no, that's really cool. And the other thing too, Delud, like I've definitely learned to appreciate that you never really know where this stuff takes you. And I think like it's kind of the only way it can be, right? Like it's, I guess, kind of nice if you have a certain, I don't know, like if you have a certain plan and that plan just sort of works out completely. um, but, you know, very often we're dealing with things that are unknown, right? Like usually research is interesting because nobody's actually figured it out, or they haven't, you know, there's an open question. And so as a result, you know, some of the stuff, I mean, you definitely hear this a lot from Nobel Prize winners, but I'm not entirely sure like it's the success or the Nobel that makes it worth doing in the first place. But you'll very often have these cases of people who, if they don't receive an outright hostile response, which is also a possibility, sometimes it's just a question of running into a situation where people think it's uninteresting, or it's you know, maybe it's not as clear as it is to you where the value lies. But of course, doing that process of studying and learning, and you know, sometimes in these cases you can even do applications. There's lots of neat avenues that are maybe not so clear at the very start. And so like the one weird thing for me is that I've had a weird sort of curve. So like I worked in movies for a little bit. I worked at a bank for a while. And I mean, I have my, you know, then I got my my degree, so that at least I had a little bit more along the lines of an, you know, an economics path. But the funny thing is, even the film stuff I'm actually finding I'm using in the current job, you know, just in a different and unexpected way. So I look forward to seeing what you do with it. All right, the Great Counterfeit. The Sun's splendor and the Forge of Days could not be joined, but Sunset Celia and the Swan King could. This secret is the trick of it. So normally I'd be testing the determinations that I can write with it, but I gotta wait. And yes, we're short a couple seconds. Skill's now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. So just as a precaution, I will restore the Whist. I can't see a situation where I'll need a whole lot of winter, but I'd feel a little bit better if I get that written down. And I'm now going to see what the remaining determinations are. Or at least the ones that I think are the remaining determinations. And before I read this, David says, I didn't realize at first that I wanted to teach. It was only when I passed through the shadow of the Valley of Doubt, it's a nice phrasing for it, to reach the joy beyond, that I realized the gratitude that I had for the professors who encouraged me not to give up. I want to be part of what causes that joy to bloom in others. It'll also be really interesting to see, too, if you do wind up finding a way of combining it with your streaming, because like there's obviously so many different ways. There's the traditional path where, you know, somebody becomes a teacher, or somebody you know, gets tenure at a, you know, at a university. But of course now we're in the age of the MOOC, we're in the age of Twitch streaming. There's lots of different ways, so it's also kind of interesting to see. One of the really, and like I don't get a whole lot of credit, sorry, when I say I don't get a whole lot of credit for this, as in like I don't deserve a lot of credit for this. It's very nice that they came back and said it, but I remember there was a game that I streamed called Night Team 4, and I think its subtitle is Military Hacking. Excuse me. But it's like, it's a hacking sim, right? There's a few hacking sims. They're usually quite good. There's a few that I can think of that are quite fun. But it's you know, it's just one of these things that is quite far outside of my direct experience, right? I was playing it because it's sort of a neat puzzle game. I like hacking sims. You know, you don't need to know a whole lot about computers to run them, and it seems to be a pretty well-researched game. But what really interested me, I remember I kind of gave a couple copies because I had some spare keys, but I got a message sometime later where one of the viewers said that they really liked the game and that actually inspired them to wind up going to university, and they were just completing some program in cybersecurity. And I do actually know there's a couple of videos that I've done on Econ that wound up having sort of an interesting afterlife, where people sort of look at the video and see what happened, or they're looking up maybe for one certain topic, and this sort of comes up in the list as well. You know, again, you never really know where these things wind up going. But I do think it's kind of interesting where I know there are a lot of people who do get into teaching because of their, because of a passion of being able to sort of make people feel an excitement for the topic that they have and such. And it's kind of neat that there are a few different ways that people have been able to satisfy that or to be able to realize that. And of course, the really interesting ones are when you're able to combine them together. So I know Sweeps the Pillow Clean is another streamer who's done Book of Hours, and I know she's done some streams talking about the kind of the lessons that she'll do and such, and it's another great example in terms of where those two worlds sort of wind up colliding. So it's really interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do with all of it. All right, so we got a couple things here. So first of all, there's In the House of the Moon, the City. Now we're not going to do this. We're not going to write this history, but we'll take a look. This history is my last and greatest work. One hand in darkness, the other in light. The city will rise in the House of the Moon, the place behind the mansis. And then we've got a determination, black, the first flower. The Watchman's Tree is the covenant that forbids knowledge to mortals, but permits it in the covenant houses of the tree, like Brankrug Isle. The black flower of Calyptra, the knight unwounded, was its first defense. Forbidden knowledge must not be spoken, must not be written, must not be known. The tree is rooted in night. Adds moon and scale to your journal, replaces any other first flower determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. Okay, so let me just write this down here. So we've got 3 first flowers. And then Nectar, and say you might do engineering streams from time to time once you have your degree. Yeah, no, I'd definitely be interested in that. Or nothing else, I'd also be interested in seeing how many people follow through on it. Because like the other thing on it too is that the numbers, I'm told that on MOOCs, the completion rates are actually very low. And some professors apparently, or well, instructors, I don't think all of them are for professors, but apparently some get quite discouraged by that. But it's kind of, to me, that's always kind of the wrong framing. Because like in some cases, people are going to try something out and they're going to find that it's not for them. And like the world is not interesting if everybody's sort of a carbon copy of ourselves. So in some cases, people deciding that, their time is better spent on something else isn't always the worst outcome, although obviously you want your course to do well. The measure really is the number of people who do discover their passion and then go on to do something with it. So, all right, the gods from stone will be reborn. There is always a compromise in this history, my last and greatest work. That compromise will embrace the gods who were stone. But we are interested in the origin, so roots origin. Our ancestors were born naked in the roots of the wood. All we ever were has risen from that darkness. With our hands and our mouths, we shaped language from mud. With our mouths and our hands, we will shape our future. Adds nectar and moon to your journal, replaces any other origin determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. All right. So... Sounds like you had a very good Christmas then. Also, belated Happy New Year. All right, so I think that might be all my determinations. Now, a couple things that I... excuse me. A couple things that I want to keep an eye on. I'm short the sky and scale. Is that true? Maybe give that another look, but... okay, so... Zero sky, winter scale. Sorry, I'm just taking a look at my options here. Okay, so the candidates that are made with cream and acting as a sort of dumpling in a deconstructed pot pie. Oh, I had dinner, but I'm actually feeling kind of hungry now. All right, so taking a look here. So again, the four aspects that we need as part of the... Excuse me. So the aspects that we need among all four. Now, we haven't decided on these, but Rose, we know that it deals with these. Winter, no second dawn. And we don't know what sky and scale bring. Now, we have all three of the first flowers will be relevant to those aspects. So Forge... Forge gives Forge and Rose. The red first flower gives Forge and Rose. Then there's one for Winter, so white, the first flower. That gives Winter and Edge. Technically, the only one that gives me something that I need is the Moon first flower. So that gives Moon and Scale. Which is slightly pushing me towards that, but we'll see. Next up, so under speech, there is Rose, which gives me Rose and Sky. That actually makes that quite appealing. And then there's Knock. So actually, I think we're definitely going to go for the Rose speech. Because I think I was slightly leaning towards that one anyway. Okay, so we've got speech, we've got first flower, and so origin is the only other one. And this one's actually a little bit of a tricky one, because we have got the sky origin, which would give us sky and forge, and then there's the scale origin, which gives us scale and heart. But I think probably what we can go for is Okay. So I think I have some ideas for... I think I have some ideas in terms of where we're going to go with this. Now, it's been very reading heavy, but what I'm going to do here is I like to think in this game of the Tree of Wisdoms as representing sort of a worldview. So what we're going to do here is we're going to read these entries, and then we're going to see how we might expand on that by making certain determinations. Now again, the determinations don't necessarily have to align with this worldview, right? People are complicated. There's lots of different ways that these things can be reconciled. But I think it's just it's nice to do a little bit of a reflection in terms of some of the things we've learned about the world through committing things to the Tree of Wisdoms. So we'll start with Horamachus Tree. Or sorry, we'll start with the journal. So, Roots of Memory. Here I began my climb. The Jeweler's Tale. A master jeweler who made a wager with a keeper of butterflies. Sorry, a master jeweler who made a wager with a keeper of butterflies. The master jeweler claimed his jeweled egg would hatch something greater than any of the butterfly keeper's chrysalids. Of course, after a month, the butterfly keeper's gardens were bright with wings and the egg had hatched nothing at all. The jeweler, unable to pay his debts, fled into the desert with his egg. Perhaps we should be careful of our limits. The first enemy. Vac is a great scar, the first enemy of Calyptra. When the black flower blossoms on the watchman's tree, she retreats, and Calyptra protects perilous knowledge behind secrecy's veil. When it is permitted, certain knowledge is forbidden to mortals unless it's wisely contained. This law is named Calyptra, and the enforcement of this law is named Calyptra also. The 3 hours who enforce it share that name. They permit that knowledge to persist only in certain sanctioned places, and the most dangerous secrets must only be recorded in the inks called incastum. The weapon. The greatest and most secret truths can only be recorded by the librarians of the Watchman's Tree. Even then, only beneath the shelter of the tree's branches, and only in the sanctioned inks called incastum. There are still certain languages in which these truths might be spoken aloud, but the hours no longer permit that power in the mouths of mortals. The toll. In the right mortal's hand, the right tool can become the weapon that begins a war. Of limits. The hours are not all powerful. There is a place beyond their reach where mortals and immortals might build a shining city of iron and ivory. The heart. The Thunderskin, the eternal drum that beats to preserve the skin of the world, is a god from flesh, which is to say he was once mortal. But the horned axe, last of the gods from stone, required his death, and so the Grail gave him up, though he loved her. Love is always subject to the will of the hours, as all Horamachists know. Black Sapphire. The bright arts speak of a shining city unbuilt. One day we might build it in the Mansus, the great house of dreams, with a foundation... with a foundation stone of black sapphire. And a light above. The new king's light shines brightly. The sanctioned version of the Book of Suns tells us that he may herald the unification of the gods who were light into a new sun and splendor. Alright, we'll go to the right on this. So, the stars. A smith's proverb in Brandkrug. What starts in the sky ends in the earth. A story goes with it that the village smith's anvil in the time of the Dewulfs was hatched from a meteor stone, and so every plow in the village knows something of the stars. Not many remember the story, but everyone remembers the proverb. Served hot. Copper, coal, fire, cinnamon, sunlight, obsidian. Add salt to taste. Serve. A red blossom. Stories written in fire end all the sooner, but are remembered all the longer. Change is the only certainty. The tree. Never underestimate the hour named Madrigad. Foolish adepts deride her as an hour of ashes. What do they think the Watchman's Tree sprang from? Of swords. Birds of a scale, wings and talons bright. Worms of a feather, kissed by stones. Kissed by fire, kissed by snow, by blight. The straight, the world is all in balance. With time, with care, with ingenuity, we can restore the balance. Through the shaping of stone, the equilibrium of ichors, the unhatching of the egg. The King and the Key. A great and golden king held the only key to his deepest prison cell. One day he asked his minister to make 8 copies and distribute them among the people. But sire, the minister said, if a rebel contrives to enter our palace, might they not release their confederates? They might, answered the king, but all kingdoms fall, and one day I might myself seek release from that cell. A tongue of sky. Cracktrack was a gift from the light above the world. When glory touched the first life motes with this language, they entered the waking world. Steel and glass. A certain parable of the bright arts tells of a priest who raised an altar of steel and glass to an old god, but then found a new god within the altar. Tomorrow's light. Every regret is a lesson. We cannot change what is past, but neither should we wish to. The first sunrise. Yesterday's light determines the colors of tomorrow, and we all began in light. From light. If even the sun's division was a plan, then once we complete that plan, we'll bring the second dawn and unite the sun. It won't be easy, but what great work ever is. The scar. The mansis is a fortress of dream where the true hours rule, and nowhere is the scar beneath it where the nowhere hours layer. Without the hours above, that scar would be an open wound, so the bright arts teach us. And understanding creates conflict. When we name our differences, we learn our enemies. Where there are no names, there are no enemies. The queen's wound. A queen should love no other, only her own image. All this talk of walking is make you think about your Morrowind OC that you play in a Pathfinder. Oh, that's neat. I'm actually slightly envious of how much you can get done with your time, dude. I realize everybody's given the same sort of 24 hours, but there are definitely people who use it better than I do. I think you're one of them. A queen could love no other, only her own image. She sought 9 colors to grace the image, and the last was the turquoise of her eyes, a gift from the shadowless king. Her court poet hymned his queen and her image, and in his poem she heard the truth, that the image was greater. So she fled into the wood, and the image ruled her domain, with the poet as its consort, but it always remembered her kindly. Much is lost, still all the winds, still every beating tongue, now still the mirrored moon, the sea's cauldron. When nothing's left, then nothing is undone. A wound in dreams. Before speech we could not dream, which is to say, before speech tore open the peacock gate to dreams, the mantis was unwounded and at peace. It's not obligatory for Long to pass that gate, but they generally choose to. Perhaps that's why the Hours charge their names to hunt down Long, even the Long who claim to serve them. Revenge. The gods who are, which we call the Hours, warred against the gods from stone and cast them down. What remains of the gods from stone we call plague, scourge, catastrophe. If the Hours were cast down in their turn, would the gods from stone be satisfied? Would revenge bring peace? The Night Arts hint that that might be so. It's still good use of time. The white. The Watchman's Tree has flowers 3, black, red, and white. Red is the life that flows in the body's courses, and white is the writing at the body's core. The end. The artist knows every work could be improved. The artist understands perfect work can never be completed. Truths that were. The inks called Incastum Terminale are permitted only to the librarians of the Watchman's Tree. Those inks can be used to reveal truths, even truths that are no longer so. Not since the dawn times, when the sun hung red and low, and we felt its warmth like autumn. If that first and gentlest sun returned, the truths might return with it. Glass the keeper. The fundamental purpose of a glass vessel, to separate what is without from what is within. Perhaps this was the first purpose of the first hour, and only in that first moment could there be a perfect understanding. And safety and silence. Unwise words are dangerous. Mourn them, remember them. speak them not. All right, an arrangement. We're now on to Nyctodromy. An arrangement, something not commonly understood. Without Vac, the exception, there could be no Calyptra, the law. Vac is, in this sense, and perhaps in every sense, Calyptra's servant. What may not be. There is a prophecy of a shining city that mortals might build. There is a paradox that a city unbuilt can always be greater than one that exists. The Night Arts teach this resolution, that the gate to that city must be shaped of black sapphire and raised in dreams. What remains? The sea, Whale Road, Salt Realm, Moon Way. Anything given to the waves may find another home, unless its home is the sea. Sure, I'll do my best. If I can, Delude. The passage. Words are the way through the sky, and a song without words is no song at all. The Wolf Wife. The Legion Rowena, holder of the Mare's Key, called Sea Opener, Wolf Wife. Whom did she invite from Ys behind the wave? When the moon sets across the sea, will they follow its road again? Choose an object in your line of sight and speak its name aloud. This won't surprise anyone, but a book. I can also give the specific book if you want, if you need precision. The material components of the book. So it's a hardcover, so paper for sure. I'm imagining there's some kind of glue or other binding. There's a little bit of fabric in terms of the spine. And then for the inside, I wouldn't be surprised if there was cardboard, but I think there's also some sort of plastic over the front as sort of like a protection against water and such. It's a hardcover book. Do you believe it was bound by hand or a machine? Almost certainly a machine. Name the title, name the authors. So the title, it's a real barn burner. Introduction to Statistics and Econometrics, and the author is Takashi Amamiya. All right, have it in my hands. Okay.
There's an author who wrote this book. There's a publisher who distributed. There's the one who edited and formatted the book. There's the one who designed the book binding machine. There are those who manufactured the machine. There are those who operated, excuse me, and supervised the machine. Actually, while we're doing this, I'm not going to read this online, but I know... there are those who made the paper, ran the machine that made the paper. Oh, for heaven's sake. All of these things, all of these people have through lines from themselves going to what they have done and where they have come from. In a mundane thing, you brush against the universe. Very true. I am going to have to... So I'm going to feel a little bit bad about breaking this one up just because it's usually associated with a type of economics which is really popular among sort of libertarian types. But there's actually a very similar idea from an essay. It's from the either early 60s or late 50s. Actually, I can look this up. December 1958. So actually, I'll tell you what, Wikipedia will help this. Excuse me. I Pencil, my family tree as told to Leonard E. Read, commonly known as I Pencil, is an essay by Leonard Read, and it was first published in December 1958 issue of the Freeman. I Pencil is written in the first person from the point of view of a pencil. The pencil details the complexity of its own creation, listing its components: cedar, lacquer, graphite, ferrule, factice, pumice wax, and glue, and the numerous people involved, down to the sweeper in the factory and the lighthouse keeper guiding the shipment to port. Quote, no mastermind. There is a fact still more astounding: the absence of a mastermind, of anyone dictating or forcibly directing these countless actions which bring me into being. No trace of such person can be found. Instead, we find the invisible hand at work. Since only God can make a tree, I insist that only God could make me. Men can no more direct these millions of know-hows to bring me into being than he can put molecules together to create a tree. The lesson I have to teach is this: leave all creative energies uninhibited. Merely organize society to act in harmony with this lesson. Let society's legal apparatus remove all obstacles the best it can. Permit these creative know-hows freely to flow. Have faith that free men and women will respond to the invisible hand. This faith will be confirmed. It was reprinted in the Freeman in May 1996 as a pamphlet entitled I Pencil, and as a pamphlet entitled I Pencil in May 1998. In the reprint, Milton Friedman wrote the introduction, and Donald J. Boudreau wrote the afterword. Friedman used this essay in his 1980 PBS television show Free to Choose and the accompanying book of the same name. In the 2008 50th anniversary edition, the introduction is written by Lawrence W. Reed, and Friedman wrote the afterword. So it's a much more... it's a less elevated example than the one that you did, but it was very interesting when I saw where you're going on that. There's actually Wikisource has the text, it turns out, but how you doing, Justice Dahl? But it's a neat one. Like I actually did first hear of iPencil from the Milton Friedman program. But it is
it is one of these things which, you know, depending on how far you want to go on the spectrum of it, there is actually something very impressive about the way that we have sort of organized things in such a way. And Delude made this point through the book example, right? Which is that there are clearly, it's not the case, like we don't, it's not that we don't have any kind of government intervention or along those lines, but like if you think about it, Book of Hours is a combination of a lot of different factors going, one of which is, you know, a couple of game developers who want to make a living and want to tell an interesting story. But, you know, there were a set of tools that were available for them as a result of actions that were not necessarily directed towards the creation of Book of Hours, right? And I think there's something kind of neat about the fact that we, through whatever mechanism, have this tendency to create things that have these, you know, have these interesting uses. Yeah, I think there's a number of different angles that you can approach this from, Delude. And again, I was a little self-conscious using the iPencil example, just because I know, like, when you show up in Free to Choose, chances are you're not going to be, you know, the Occupy Wall Street crowd. Well, actually, I guess Occupy Wall Street had a number of libertarians in it, but like this is definitely going to get certain types of political conversation going. But there is something really interesting about that, right? And it could, you know, there's a few different examples of this working, right? And you can definitely divorce it from specific state. Sorry, you can't say it. You can't completely divorce it from politics, because obviously if you have like a complete command economy, the whole premise behind that is that there's somebody deciding what needs to be made. But yeah, there is just something kind of neat about the fact that, like, you know, the Unity engine, the Godot engine, Unreal Engine, or some custom, I get a custom one is maybe made with a little bit more intent, but that essentially people don't necessarily have to be able to see the whole big picture to be able to create things that are of use. And to a certain extent, in some cases, like if you think of the origins of the Unity engine, it was actually a game that was not successful, but they took the tools that they had developed for that game, and this wound up enabling the creation of many other games, which did go on to become quite successful, right? So if you like Hollow Knight, Hollow Knight in part owes its existence to the fact that the team that made Unity did not necessarily succeed as a game developer, but did realize that what they had created was a set of tools that other people could use. And of course, Book of Hours exists under similar circumstances. So, but the thing is that a lot of these software examples, because software doesn't cost a whole lot to transfer, it's not often as powerful as some of the more physical examples that you can draw from. Right, in terms of, like, again, as Daly pointed out, like the book has, I mean, so I come from BC, large forestry industry. So the paper needs to be created. There's all sorts of different ways of doing book binding. It's a hardcover, cardboard needed to be created. There's the machine that needed to be created. There's the publisher. There's the author. And then, of course, all of those have all this ancillary activity in terms of the people who maintain it. So there's an administrator for the publisher. There's a shipping company to make sure that I could get it. Actually, that particular book, I needed to ship it to somebody, excuse me, somebody in the States who then mailed it to me. So that also has a personal connection in that sense. But it is definitely a fun little train of thought to go on. I am going to finish the rest of these commitments, and we'll see if I can make a determination before the end of the night. But I know we're not making as much progress through the season, and I do blame this partly on my health. All right, from Change. We recognize the dream places that the Watchman shows us, though we have never seen them for. Perhaps we were something else when we saw them. Oops.
words to walk by. Unwise words unlocked unwise doors. We can use wise words to lock them. Sapphire, there's a prophecy of a glorious city that mortals could raise, but the hours of the chancel have decreed that it will not exist. The decrees of the chancel are not defied, but now and then they have been circumvented, and we might conceive that a city with walls of shining flint could be raised in dreams in the Mansus. And Peacock, the night arts teach that the Peacock Gate is the highest door in dreams to which mortals may aspire, but that before she rose to this estate, the gate was a name of the Horned Axe. The Dartsmen, the assassins of the Tragulari, who end the long lives of Long, tell stories of the wars between the hours and the dawn of the world, when the sun was red and low, wars where the savage sound of savage bells unraveled the light and moon and sun, wars where dreams burned on pyres, where Long were the fuel. All this ended, the Tragulari say, once the worms came and the hours had a common enemy, and so the Tragulari fear worms, hate worms, and make offerings to worms. Yeah, there is a certain level. It's kind of funny you mentioned that, David, because I do tend to find that there are certain scales that when I think of them in abstract terms, I find them very easy to think about. And as soon as I actually try to get down to details, it flies apart really quickly. So here's an example. And this is one that I think people find incredibly strange because they don't have a problem conceiving of this. And I think it's just a question in terms of the level of detail that you want. So when I think of a large business, and in this case, I'll go for like a particularly large business like an Apple. But honestly, this becomes difficult for me even for things that are not like among the largest companies in the world. The discipline of accounting allows me to look at, the balance sheet, the income statement, the cash flow statement for Apple. And the money that goes through that company, to me, is a perfectly understandable thing, right? Conceptually, I have no problems with that. I may have to look up a definition for a thing or two because I'm not an accountant, but I have read enough financial statements to have a pretty good idea of what those things mean. And the things that I don't know, I kind of have enough knowledge to be able to navigate. And yet, in a completely different sense, that amount of money, that scale of activity, right, is completely inconceivable to me. Like, that many phones being created, the components for that many phones being sourced, being combined together, how many people are hired to do that, how the company is divided into all these different divisions, right? I think most people who work for some kind of institution, like, I definitely don't work for myself. So, I have, there's my role and I have someone who supervises me and there's someone who supervises that person and so on and so forth. And I mean, I know what the top person in my, my organization looks like. I've met them. But like, to take that and then, like, I know my own little branch. I can sort of, if I squint a little bit, conceive of that for the whole organization I work for. But even then, I'm probably doing some sorts of cheats. But like when I sit down on it, in one sense, as when I have a model, when I have something like accounting or when I have something like economics, it's something that I can conceive of, and I have a very orderly way of thinking about it. And yet, in a completely different sense, like the accounting of a large business is something of a scale that starts getting me thinking in like this Lovecraftian sense of, once you hit a certain level of knowledge, you just want to run screaming back into the ignorance of a new dark age. There's a level of complexity to things where if you actually take the time to look at it,
really starts outpacing your ability to keep track of it. So I definitely know what you're talking about. But I also very much am very familiar with my limits on that. In Ashes, all days are death, all lives are sunset. For a time, light persists, but we should not fear the scorch of a second dawn. Of locks, the locksmith's first duty, a key for every lock and a lock for every key. If a key were an hour, what lock would it open? Secrecy, knowledge, power. The sights we name are rarely named by day. The shapes we seek are rarely sought in clay. The names we claim are often claimed as pay. The chandler's kindling. If flowers are flame, the earth is their fuel. The hour-named flower maker cannot harm us, and he cannot find us, but he always has what we desire, and the hour-named chandler can bring the spark to light the flame. Carapace of the Lygian Medusa, it has been said, she might be the oldest of her kind still living, and she is dead. Skolokosophists say she is the oldest of the Seglas kind, of a carapace lineage, famed for the breadth of their wisdom and the sharpness of their teeth. The first sun. In the dawn of times, the sun was lower, so we gave it our blood. From our blood it knew us, and so it was kinder. But those days are long gone. If we were foolish enough to find the first sun, give it our blood again, it would devour us. If we fed it the blood of our enemies, of course, it might devour them. And the chandler's path. When the chandler goes a-hunting in the dark of the wood, he shields his candles so prey is not forewarned, but he leaves a trail of ivory wax, so we may follow him and purchase his prizes. After all, the goal of every hunt is to bring home a trophy. Daily says, I wouldn't say it makes me run screaming. It makes me contented knowing that I'll never fully understand, and then it comes, and with that comes the promise that I will always have questions to ask. That's a slightly more optimistic way of looking at it, but I feel if I'm playing a Lovecraftian game, I need to invoke the opening paragraph of the Call of Cthulhu. The Weaver's Tale. There is a prophecy of a master weaver who will unwisely seek to find the future in a tapestry of her own hair. Her house will grow dark, shrouded in the labyrinths of her tresses. Pilgrims will seek her in the cellar of her house, where she will plead with them to cut her free. They will always fail, and she will always devour them. At last, one will come who will ask instead to stay with her. Others will join them until the house becomes a palace, and the palace a city below the world, where all are welcome, and in the tapestry all truths are revealed. Grail and Moth. The gods from stone made a law that the keys of dream cannot be held or owned. The time of stone is past, but the keys remain. So the holders of these keys can only be the 7 Lygians, whose crime has set them outside the law. The Lygians serve an hour of Grail and Moth. When the last remnants of the god from stone are consumed, the law will be consumed with them. Underneath, red the dawn and black the night, and white what's left. Above we see, beneath we know. What endures? Cut a thread, and the tapestry must be healed. The root and the source. In the innermost walled garden of the palace of the shadowless kings in Persia, there grew a yew tree older than any other. Its root was red, its flowers were black, its berries were white. The kings would leave their girl children overnight in the nest of its roots in memory of the great mother of their line, and so their daughters were assured health, longevity, and wisdom. This is the source of all our science. What may be known? Calyptra is the law that requires secret knowledge to be concealed, except in the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. The number of the hours of Calyptra is 3, and we do not speak of the oldest hour, though we remember her. The Grail's Favorlings. The bright-winged, dark-winged Gladerflog kind called themselves the Grail's Favorlings. They are gone now, like all the carapace kinds, but we can still use the arts of the hive to glean the sweetness in the hidden places of the wood, the legacy of the carapace cross. What is taken? The oldest living hours of the gods who were blood. The gods from stone were older still, but they're buried in the earth, scattered in the sea, lost to the moon. This is why we're always careful when we make the sacrifice, because if we spilt enough blood on their graves, they'd return for revenge. And the well in the wood. When the first hunters were starving in the wood, in the days before its darkening, they found a deep and crimson well. In it they drowned the beasts of the earth,
so the beasts would be reborn threefold, and the hunters could feast. So the Red Grail came to be, and so ever since she feeds us, and she feeds upon us. 2 more to go. The Thief's Tale. There's a very old story by thieves about a competition among the Aviform Hours, the secret gods who take the shape of birds. The dove boasted of the bones she'd stolen from flesh, and the crow of the flesh he'd picked from the bones. One of the Kite twins bragged that she'd stolen the borders from kingdoms, and the other that she'd taken the roads from crossroads. The magpie told all the colors he'd taken that are no longer found in the world, and the laughing thrush topped that with tales of the sights she'd stolen. But when the glitter-winged seventh of their number told them what he'd stolen, they were all shocked into silence. They fell upon him and stripped him of his wings and drove him from the sky. So he and what he stole are gone from the world, and now we cannot even name them, but still we feel their lack. To heal, a deft enough binding might heal anything, flesh, spirit, song, stone. What might be? A dream of a city of perfect balance. There can be no perfect balance outside dream. Meditate on the hour named Meniscate, whose light distinguishes the possible from the real. Let the city remain unbuilt. A vigilance. The hours, once called Flint and Wheel, are gone, but the blood of their name emanations was mingled with the blood of mortals, and from it sprang the line of Antaios. As long as the Antaian line continues, the legacy of Flint and Wheel may endure. The light, the night, the wood. What lit the wood in the days before its darkening? There was a light upon the earth long before glory came to the sky. Preserve the night, and the light might return. And night, the velvet is not the oldest hour, but she is the oldest hour of Calyptra. The black flower on the watchman's tree is the preservation of secrets, and without it, the tree would fall. And finally, birdsong. The Fisher's Tale. There's a story told beside the sea of a city of amber and orichalcum that lies behind the waves. Those who eat of its fruits can breathe water and drink light, but they can never drink anything else afterwards. Only in another history they say, but if you tie your nets right, you might just catch one of its citizens in this history, and they might just tell you the way. A city. The 7 tainted immortals we call Legions are relentless in their appetite and outcast under the laws of heaven, but they have their uses to the hours. The Legion Cleidocus has known all the great keys, and even now she holds the key of days, so every year she meets the vagabond in Vienna to exchange the names of lesser keys for the stories of the vagabond's travels. The Roost, a thief of sights, a scavenger of thrones, a border reaver and a thief of knots, a thief of colors and a thief of bones. How they began. In the beginning, the Carapace Cross served the first hours, the gods born from stone. And the first of the Carapace Cross were the Thritage kind, who sought the monarch at the crossroads to rule them wisely, and found him in themselves, who began as many and ended as one. The Wolf's Return. The sanctioned version of the Book of Suns says that the wolf divided was awoken by the sun's division. We know from this that the wolf was its own hour even when the sun was whole. So we glean and we guess that the sun might be healed and the wolf returned to its slumbers. So we glean and guess that a second dawn would bring peace, but the wolf will fight to prevent it. The Threshold. Every traveler crosses a threshold twice. The horned axe is the hour who faces both ways at every threshold. And looking up. The gardener's first lesson is this. Look up. What starts as weather ends in the world. What starts as sky ends in the soil. This is what the birds know, and the birds know most things first. So these are not the only choices, but these were my choices. So what I want to do now, I do want to get the rose determination. So I will, excuse me, I'm going to want to make porphyrine. Now, I actually forget. My best bet would be to... Right.
I could look at my spreadsheet, but I kind of want to try and avoid that. Excuse me. Well, now I know how to make a horizon sight. Well, that was short-lived. All right. Yeah, so that FET's a non-starter. How am I going to try and do this? I don't recall if one of these benches had rows. Oh, actually... Nope, the Chrysalis doesn't have it either. I used to have a fairly reliable way of making porphyrine, but I've completely blanked on it. So this will at least give me a little flexibility. So I'm just going to systematically go through all of my rows stuff. The Enduring Reflection is actually a nice little test. Yeah. Okay. So this will be a problem. Oh, maybe not. I'm pretty sure it's the Ichor Auroral. Okay, so Inks of Power is one option. Excuse me. Okay, Sand Stories as well. All right, so Inks of Power is the highest level that I have right now. So if it's Ichor Auroral that I need... Actually, come to think of it, I think there was maybe a... I'm not thinking of Inks of Revelation, but I think there might be another one that lets me make porphyrine without rows. But I don't need to get too clever with this. So, yeah, I need basically a confounding parable, and it wouldn't hurt to make another Ichor Auroral. But I think Ichor Auroral is a pretty straightforward one to make. We can probably do that with a lantern. I'll add the Big Fost just for the example. Interesting. I'll also add a big lantern memory just for the sake of an example. I wonder if I can throw the Deer Day lens as well. This is just a chance for me to learn a couple of extra recipes as well. Okay. Excuse me. I could be wrong on the Ichor Auroral as well, but I don't think I am. Oh, it was Sky. Okay. So I guess a slightly different order.
Interesting. You and me both. Okay, fair enough. So the real trick here, I guess it's Watchman's Paradox is my highest level. So I do still need a memory, unfortunately. Well, that or I use my higher level Faust. I'd rather not do that. But yeah, I've got some good material to work with now. So first priorities, I need the resources I need for the crafting that I'm going to do. So we will get a confounding parable. And we will get... What am I doing? An intuition wouldn't hurt now that I think of it. All right, next up, I need to think about what I'm doing with door and wall. So it was knock and forge. Okay, so this is another pretty straightforward one for me. We'll put door and wall up first. And I guess it's pyroglyphics next, so that's 6 knock and forge, and then 6 lantern and forge. So let's, we'll focus on the knock first. Oh, and then there's the question of the next book that I want to read. So ideally that would be The Origins of Hours. Nope, we read The Origins of Hours. I just don't remember what memory it had. Songs of the Carapace Cross. Okay. So I think that one might have actually required a Newman. But I'll just verify that. Which is a shame, because I would have actually liked to have read this one. So I'm too short, but we can do the occult scrap. So moth choice, I can master this mystery, enough moth to match mystery moth. Alright, so I'm going to read my paper for the occult scrap. It's a usual routine now. Now, with that in mind, I can put the remaining amounts into leveling up door and wall. So, again, knock and forge first. That's 1... which one was I? I think on to messenger awaiting your destination, but we don't have the VAC, so all right, back to advice on containment. So just double checking here. Yeah, so these first ones were for my crafting. This I'm reading ahead, so we've got 1, 2, this will be 3. We'll use these. 3. 4.
regrets will do. I'm trying to remember. Let's just do this from the start again. All right, I think I'm going to be one short. And we're on to... Okay, can't do manual... manner in which the alchemist was spared. But this will do. So I've spread myself a little thin for today, but I think this will still work out in the end. So the main goal for the rest of tonight is to get the to get one determination in the journal. The leveling up the skills and all of that is nice, and it does have its own help in the sense that I'll be able to get the different like I'll be able to write determinations. I'll just generally find it easier to perform certain actions, but right now getting the... If there isn't a Salon to do, the next priority is basically going to be to to get through the... So it should be, if I can do a determination that I know I want to do, prioritize that. If there isn't a determination that I can sort of justify, let's say, then... Oh, actually, I'm also going to need to read another Newman text before too long. I wish I had a good use for this. Well, Voyages of Furnish and Oriel. Maybe. It's a little aggressive this late into the day, but... Actually, you know what? No, that's silly. Okay. It is written, Musgrave, 4th of the DeWolf line, writes tentatively of the Covenant of Brandkrug and the legacy of the sacred inks called Incausta Potentialia. As the light passeth through a prism into many colors, so the great inks separateth into the lesser inks, and the lesser inks into the inks minor. Musgrave coyly refers to the great inks, coyly refuses to talk of the great inks, or else refuses to admit that he doesn't know much about them. He insists that Ugol and Stargol, which can be mixed with sufficient nectar or sky aspect, are sufficient for most befitting purposes. The Queen's Turn, a 16th century translation of the Barrowchild's account of Lagia's turn, when Lagia, the Queen Unsated, was offered the opportunity to enter the service of the Hours of the Triple Knot, as long as she repudiated her brother-lover Antaios. Lagia accepts, setting aside the arts of the Low Red Sun associated with Antaios. She bargains, however, for freedom for her daughters. The Hours of the Triple Knot accept casually, knowing that Lagia has devoured her daughters. But wily Lagia has decided in the secret hollow of her heart that she will adopt any who ask if they can prove their fierceness. The traditions described here, the ones generally described as Hill and Hollow, are associated with Lagia before her turn. But now that she is a name of the Red Grail, they might also be safely used before an altar of the Triple Knot. The Barrowchild's Elegies. The Barrowchild, a Gaulish adept who won a place in the ranks of the Ordo Lamea, enumerates the great shadows laid to rest in the tombs of power and discusses their various conditions. The Barrowchild identifies numerous modes that are neither true death nor true life: the vitrification of the heart, the corrupt light of the wood, core stasis, the wandering of the fet. The Barrowchild warns particularly of the avidity of tryst, where a remnant shadow's longing for change survives its sense of self and even devours its wist. That longing may draw the curious into the tomb, where the remnant shadow changes so that it cannot be distinguished from its visitor, or that the reverse becomes true, and that it is never again possible to say whether it is just the shadow or the visitor that exits the tomb. Better now. Alright, let's make some money. The Three and the Three, Kerisham manuscript, a more recent version of a much older text. This book describes the operations of the Chancel and the Calyptra, two triads of hours with subtle, far-reaching powers and responsibilities. It has been heavily censored, but even so contains potent secrets.
The deepest knowledge is safeguarded by the covenant of the Watchman's Tree, whose patrons are Calyptra, the three flowers on the Watchman's Tree, blood, soot, and snow. Calyptra may be known as Night Dawn Eclipse. The chancel may be known as Threshold Mirror Shell. Calyptra and chancel then are two. Is Janus a third? Advice on containment. Thirza Blake discusses ways to keep wood things out of trouble and Mansus things in it. Thirza is irritatingly light on specifics, insisting above all that the duties of an adept are the duties of a host, and that a conjured spirit should be kept in as luxurious a vessel as possible. Thirza notes the similarities between the lantern-long habit of scrying, returning to the physical world despite their absence of a body, by entering a mirror or light, and Pomander's techniques of confining Mansus Long to mirrors. She wonders whether Pomander himself might be lured to visit Hush House if provided with a sufficiently alluring scrying. A Manual for Departure. The author, who identifies itself as the Jekadu, claims to be one of the great hooded princes of the Land of the River. The style is informal, even chatty. No, these doors shouldn't be recorded, but if we had only recorded the things before we'd had to leave the Fifth History, we would be in a much better state. So here I am writing it down, and if you don't like it, you can sanction me. The Manual for Departure lists a number of strategies, occult, martial, and political, for quick escapes. Many are irrelevant, obsolete, or enigmatic, but the manual does include a number of powerful techniques for opening portals. The Vinzant inscriptions. Everett Vinzant transcribed these from a cliff in Anatolia, where he famously survived a lightning strike. He died 7 years later to the day. His bones, the legend has it, were hot to the touch. Long ago, the Sisterhood of the Knot recounted, the Forge loved the hour called the Sun and Splendor. The Red Grail long anticipated their union, and the Grail priestesses prophesied it. The remainder of the text consists of gloating remarks by the Grail priestesses of the shaping that will come, interpolated with warnings and laments from those of the Sisterhood who serve the Ring-Yu, and especially the Horned Axe. Nevertheless, an invocation to the Forge included as part of an attempt to urge it onwards. No problem, Jay. Thank you very much for stopping by. Yeah, it's getting quite late for me as well, so we're going to be wrapping up soon, but we'll probably do the determination, but I'll be able to read it again in a future episode, so you're not going to be missing anything major. But I do have some parts that I need, so we're going to go to the solar altar. The sun and splendor is the hour which was sundered, the hour which is not conquered, the hour from which proceed all the other hours of the day, or so the church teaches. So, this is not it. Wait, was it really Watchman's Paradoxes? I guess it was. Excuse me. Condense light to a rose fluid. And then for that one, we're going to take Inks of Power. The Ichor Auroral. Oh dear. Deepen the Ichor into the Incastum Terminale Porphyrim. Okay, not my ideal move, but definitely one that I can still manage. And we should still be able to level up door and wall, even though I am going to have to give up the occult scrap again. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. So I certainly have no shortage of things to do. I'm going to just kick the tires on the idea of reading Voyages of Furnishing at Oriel. This one is a what? Fusine. Ooh, we already used Fusine 2.
Um, I think I can live with... I think I can live with overwriting the... Let's get that old lost music. So we're not going to do anything with the Great Counterfeit. It's a little bit of a shame, but I think I'd prefer to make a little more progress towards my current goal. So, Rose back again. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. So, the next goal was to... It was knock and forge. I think it was pyroglyphics. So that's forge and lantern. Okay. Doesn't help. Doesn't help. Doesn't help. Bittersweet Certainty will give me lantern. I think I'll read the Book of the White Cat. Or maybe Secret Colors? Yeah, it's been a while since I've read Secret Colors, so... Okay, so that's 2 of 6. I have VAC this time, so we can catch up on the ones I skipped. So that's 3 with the forge. That will do. 5. I think I might have miscounted actually, but let's carry on. Okay, so just to recap, so Newman, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So after Foresight, we need a forge or a lantern again. And that will be... I might have actually worked myself into a corner here. Yeah, so none of these gives me Forge or Lantern in isolation. It makes me wonder if I skipped one that I needed. But the better option is just to use the... I'll just interact with one of the objects in the house. Or no, what am I saying? I can use the Great Counterfeit. No, I can't, because it'll be gone in a minute. Sacre bleu. Oh, have a good night, Delude. I'm sorry, I didn't see your message before, so if... hopefully you hear that. If not, I'll hopefully remember when you come back. But thank you very much for hanging out, both of you. Alright, the skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. I think the writing's on the wall as far as the time that I have, so... But what I am going to do is look at painting.
Let's get the first end. So we're a little behind on where I want to be in terms of leveling the stuff up, but that's fine because again, the headline moment's going to be making something with the porphyryne. All right. The Turquoise Hand, a calligraphic manual of Ramsund which employs as exemplar text Farududdin's Conference of the Birds. At noon, the sun moves like the beating of a wing. At sunset, he sends the herald child with her candle. At midnight, he sends the wind that extinguishes the candle flame. Commentary, illustrations, and interleavings carry revelations never intended in the original, a sense of history and the senses of histories. That old lost music. In the right histories, every song ever sung still lingers in wind and echo, untouched by the demands of eternity. I'm gonna skip over this one for now. Keon at Abydos, a play dealing with the 9-year sojourn of a snow goddess in the Thracian city of Abydos by Apollo Fireweaver, in English, published in 1892, purportedly from an older Greek text. The entity called Keon arrives in a blizzard and demands the city gates are barred. As Abydos falls under her spell, the dead return but do not speak. For 8 years, the city is a place of slow death, frosty ecstasy, and silent beauty, but in the 9th year, a conspiracy of shouts is mounted against the quiets that Keon demands. The conspirators open the city gates, and a scarred man comes to drag Keon out by the hair. Summer returns, but the conspirators die of remorse. Opus Magnum Ceruleum. Ambrose Westcott used to render the title of this venerable and anonymous work mockingly as The Big Blue Business. A kinder translation would be The Great Work in Azure. The reason for Westcott's enmity to this work are clear to any pyroglyphicist. It is written at least 2 centuries before he was born, but anticipates or undermines many of his preferred conclusions. The work in question is the creation of the blue gold, allegedly necessary for the terrible rite which allows a forge-long to become a name. The book mentions that pyroglyphics techniques can be used with forge to create iotic essence as a necessary component, but withholds the final step, insisting that the consequences are too dire, and that any interest should remain only a matter of theory. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers to the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. Glimmerings, an anonymous prison diary written by a dreamer convicted of Oniric irresponsibility and confined to the Cucurbit. The prisoner is plainly terrified and bewildered by their situation, and has been unable to wrangle a coherent explanation out of anyone, but the dreams keep coming, and they keep writing them down. Snow, broken mirrors, half-heard sky music, flowers of white, red, and black, a blood-streaked winter dawn, the most notorious signifiers of Oniric risk, fantastically vivid and detailed. No wonder they were locked up. Their final recorded dream is of a worm jewel beneath Brankrug Isle, which they open with a key carved from their finger bone. I thought I might have been setting myself up for disappointment, but I'm okay. The messenger awaiting her destination, the Limian Burzgash, records his prophecies of a city unbuilt and entreaties to its heralds. Hey, Tabirosity, I'm actually wrapping up soon anyway, so it might be a short lurk, but I hope you are doing well. The herald may never arrive at the city unbuilt. The city may never be built without the herald's message. The herald is finally identified as the 12th initiate of the House of Silence. The foundation stone will be taken from the House of Silence, Burzgash suggests, to become the foundation stone of the city unbuilt. The Secret Colors. Black Ellie, disgraced Damascene matriarch of the Sisterhood of the Triple Knot, wrote this while fleeing the agents of the duty. Ellie writes of the secret colors of the sun, the blessed traces of error, weaknesses in sunlight, balancing principles in its reflection. A deeper account of these secret colors, Ellie reveals, was kept at a shrine to the 3 hours of the chancel at the Grey Rock in the sea, far from the intrigues of the sisterhood and the church. It is hidden from the common eye, but can be revealed with the arts of sickle and eclipse. And then finally, the new book that we were reading, and this, I think I've read this before, but I don't remember it that well. Micah Z, sometimes called the Magus of Quartz, etched this work in acid on stone. It has been reproduced many times in many languages since, but the reproductions are often lost to landslides. Z describes the rites of the gods who were stone, the first hours, as practiced before the existence of human civilization by the Carapace Cross. He claims a final survivor of the cross shared the information with him. The rites are largely obsolete now. Few have been observed in the last 1,000 years at least to have any effect at all. Nevertheless, Z identifies at least one invocation of particular power. He warns that it should only be used with caution, lest the gods who were stone might find their way back from nowhere. So, Edicts Liminal. This is another example of one that I don't know the memory from. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. Okay. The first end. A single candle burns against darkness. Its flame is a crescent moon. Signed, Nina Lagasse. So here we are going to take pyroglyphics. Excuse me. That's another level 7 for us. Again, the real goal here is going to be to get the porphyryne, but while we wait for that, I'm also hoping I didn't blow it by using my higher level FET, but we have Edicts Liminal. That gives us Knock and Moth. So it looks like, yeah, everything's kind of level 6 now, so excuse me. So it can only be 3, so I'm just kind of queuing these up. Okay. That gets me started. So Knock and Sky. Heart and Moth, and Heart and Knock. So let's go for Knock and Sky first. We're going to need 6 of those. So that's 3. Hmm. 4.
I really that short on knock and... No, that can't be right, because if I bring in the... Actually, I'm going to avoid that one. Okay, so that covers me for Lockworks and Clockworks. Now we need Heart and Moth. So actually, the Beguiling Melody makes sense, and or no, Beguiling Melody doesn't help me there. No, Beguiling Melody does, just for different reasons. This one we will use Lake Fusino Recordings. And I think I'll also read the one for the Savage Hymn. Okay, back on track. Heart and Moth. So I guess we use core in this case. And for that, probably Solace. And then I think our last option is Storm. Why can I never remember Storm? Here we go. Alright, I think I'm going to have to make do with that. I guess I could try one other, I could try the Wistful Melody, but I think I'm okay with this for now. We're not super short on time, but I do want to make sure that I have enough. I want to give myself enough time to kind of get all my different priorities handled. And then, if I have a little bit spare, I might want to read Origins of Hours and Songs of the Carapace Cross just so I can get that off the list. Alright, with Keeper level Rose, not Sky, the Ichor Auroral is a precursor to the Great Ink Porphyrine. So you know what? I think there might be a lantern version of this. Alright, I will worry about that later though. We've already queued everything up for the 7s, so while I wait for that, let's get the occult scrap replenished. And for that I think I'm going to use the health this time. And of course we're going to need to wait for the desk to become available before I can make a determination. So even though we're 17 seconds down, let's wait for a desk to get freed up. Alright, better now. So, get the money. I might as well clear this out too, so nothing's history when first it happens. The Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the Mansus through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, and 7 the doors of the house, 7 the lesser aspects of the hours, and knock the aspect above all, for the mother of ants. Ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants no longer permits use of this rite. The Invisible Opera. unfinished recording. A recording of a 1911 attempt at a performance of Wings Within Wings, the so-called Invisible Opera. The singers complete the skewbald aria, Beneath Our Skin, and A Rose in Maya without incident, but the Invisible Opera is dedicated to Faresref the magpie, who delights in unexpected interruptions. The recording ends with a clamor of horrified voices, a grating metallic screech, and a soft brass buzzing that fades into burring silence. The Road to Janus, the Limian Burzgash makes a series of prophecies regarding the initiates of the House of Silence, with intricate, if unhelpful, predictions on their passage through the house. The sixth initiate is Priest and Key, Gate and Church. He shall cross the sea and open the tide. He shall not be the 11th, yet there shall be 7 between them. In the first year of his time, the flower door is opened. The 12th initiate is Salvation and Rack, Steed and Rider, who chooseth one blossom of 3, who casteth away the key, and whom the key shall not cast away, who comes after the flame and before the snow. Unhatched hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers, and name of the hour called Meniscate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next, madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The hymn of the phases celebrates the Meniscate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The hymn of the reflections more puzzlingly celebrates the Meniscate as the sister of Janus, mother of shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. The Locksmith's Dream, Portions and Proportions, the second volume of Therese Galmier's examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. The frontispiece has been slashed with a razor. In this volume, Galmier records fewer dreams and explicates more on her own elaborate theories. We see this again and again. What is below can't escape what is above. The finest artisans all dream of the white door in the end. I'm no artisan, only a scholar. I think there's a secret that all these artisans know, but I think that secret is only half the story. All right, we're going to skip over that. The Orchid Transfigurations, Noon, the third volume of a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. A long dialogue between the Mountain Mother and the Vigilant Storm describes the ways in which both mountains and storms end, and the protections they use against those ends. But we must use the knife, said the lion-throned one, the noose, the flame, the waking word, against those who have passed the 3-valve door, and so none may pass. That is our law, and the law of the sun. Those Who Do Not Sleep, the mystic Broadnax discusses the origins of the Sister and Witch and of the Thunderskin. The Sister and Witch were born in 2 wombs, one poor, one rich, across the sea. The sister was stronger in the aspect of heart, and so their survival was assured. The witch was stronger in the aspect of grail, and so they were not satisfied. When the Sister and Witch came west, the Red Grail permitted their ascension, but then grew jealous of their power. It lured a great musician into the ranks of its names, and caused him to be reborn from blood as a heart hour, so that the Grail might maintain dominion there also. But its victory is not assured. Lake Fusino recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine marshes, the wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. These are the song the sisters sang to the witch, that the Thunderskin roared to the sky, the songs with which the Dwendrazons of the Mansus keep their vigil. Once heard, they are not forgotten. The Temptations of Architecture. The antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of Dor, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowen. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair even now in Treowen. A silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowen, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. And the Morphe Codex, the priestess of the Sisterhood of the Knot, claims to have discerned the true meaning of the Thunderskin's birth. The writer credits the Red Grail, the Ring Yew, and the Horned Axe, the powers the Sisterhood reveres, with agreeing a final treaty between the hours of the house and the hours they displaced. The Thunderskin loved the Yew, and the Grail destroyed him, as restitution for the slaying of the Horned Axe's sisters and brothers. The Thunderskin entered the Mansus through the Peacock Door, a privilege never given to the witch and sister, but then their merit was much less. The writer admits that entry through the Peacock Door is unseemly, but insists that under the circumstances there was no other way.
And finally, this is an Incastum Terminale, one of the great inks. Use it with your journal to record a history and fulfill your reason for coming to Hush House, if you so choose. I do. So, the determination. Actually, I'm going to do this at Green's desk. Or the Vagabond desk. Actually, I'm going to do it at Natan's desk. It's an apothecary's desk, all right, but it dates from at least 100 years after Natan of Regensburg came here. Of course, his son, his grandson, and his great-grandson were all Natan's too. I think preliminary meter is my highest. Nope, Path and Pilgrim. Make a determination. Speech the key. Language is the key. It was language that opened the doors of the Mansus. Without language, we could have no peace. Without language, we would still be beasts, worms, mud. Adds Rose and Sky to your journal, replaces any other speech determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. Actually, sorry, there is one other thing I want to test. I might have tried this before, but yeah, one short. All right. So next up, Lockworks and Clockworks. Now, I should just double check here. So we've got this one. Why do I think surgery is an exsanguinate? Oh, because of the knock, of course. So basically, the Sky and the Moth are the two unique ones for Lockworks and Clockworks and Weaving and Not Working. So for this one should be 1, 2... I can do the Solace. Yeah, no, we don't need to get too clever with this. So, Lockworks and Clockworks, these 4, or these 6 rather. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. So, Weaving and Not Working. So let's focus on as much Heart and Moth as I can get for this thing. So I have 1. I need a few more. So I think the easy answer here is we do the phonograph again. I'm going to use a health on this one. So that's 2 heart. Not going to use the Arab for anything else, so we can give that up. And I want a Solace before I go too much further. Okay, sorry. I need to just find my bearings again. So, we've got the storm. We'll have a cheerful ditty as 2. Solace is 3. Satisfaction will give me heart, so I can't remember where I was on this. I'm gonna try number 2. Sorry, again, I'm getting sidetracked a lot, so I'm just gonna audit this one more time. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. This is otherwise occupied. Okay, so 2 more. Okay, so that's all the heart. Now I gotta think about moth. So that's 5, and then I'd have to use the occult scrap, which maybe isn't the worst thing in this case. I'm just trying to think if there's a clever way for me to get what I need. Not really. So I'll get the remaining knock that I need. Oh boy. Running out of stuff to apply here. Did I already use up the facade? Yeah. Alright, we're really getting short. I will give up one of these core after all. And this one, yeah, we can give up a tryst. And you know what? I'd feel a lot better. Let's get that old lost music again. All right. So it'll be a little bit of an adventure, but I think I can manage. I am, however, half an hour later than I wanted to be, and then there's the business of getting to bed at a decent hour, so I might speed up the playthrough a little bit here. Alright, the skill is now level 7, its power aspects have also increased. All right, a bonanza. The Orchid Transfigurations of Birth, the second volume of a compilation of Quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. Flood, or pseudo-Flood, suggests alignments between the alchemical tradition of Rubidoux and the older Grail traditions through the Pine Knight's quest for the Cinnabar Cup. Seek the cup in the birthing bed, the Pine Knight is told. The midwife at the birthing bed, to his amazement, is the Mountain Mother. In a fit of awe, he both gelds and flays himself. The vigilant storm bursts joyfully from the remains. We've read The Temptations of Architecture recently, so we'll skip over that. The account of Kanishk at the Spider's Door. Lot Kahuli, Kanishk's victim and lover, wrote this account, perhaps posthumously. Kanishk sought to become a name. In pursuit of that end, he made Lot Kahuli the vessel of his appetites, promising Locke that they would ascend together. At the Spider's Door, he betrayed his lover. The Chiliarch listened to it happen and then forced Kanishk into his service. The Chiliarch cannot be denied. Lot Kahuli remained to write this work and to describe the outer magics of struggle and contest. The Locksmith's Dream Trespasses, the third volume of Teresa Galmier's examination of the parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. In this volume, notoriously, Galmier's prose begins to disintegrate, and it is not clear which dreams are in fact her own. The woman in the sand-colored robe has told me the stairways of the Mansis go ever up, death is down. The mother of ants guards both directions with each of her heads, and so the passage must always be through a wound. I think the white door might be a wound. That's one reason the dead sometimes pass it. I think I have the other half of the secret now, and I hope my reader can put both halves together. The Raptures of Forculus, the first volume of Abbot Jeffrey's hypothetical theological debates in the Socratic mode. If Janus were an hour, Forculus might be counted among his names, but that door remains closed, and Forculus is not. Jeffrey discusses the signs that mark doors, which might permit or forbid access to certain thoughts and dreams, speculating carefully on which of the sanctioned hours might teach or govern each sign. I've read a couple of these recently, so let me just I don't want to skip over everything all the time, but in this case I've got a couple that I've read a few times before. So, The Geminiad Volume 1, a fragile manuscript illustrated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language Fusine is much older. The cover is tooled goatskin decorated with garnet. These pages outline the nature and doctrines of an hour that weaves together the willing, an hour that is sought beneath the moon and the water's edge, the sister and witch. The language is willful, naughty, poetic. It'll take some untangling. The first volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the sister and witch has been known to manifest as the witch and sister, and that this face is always hungry while the other face may heal. It implies connections between the sister and witch and the hours of the upper Mansis, especially the lunar hour called the Meniscate, but it is ambiguous on whether the sister and witch is a Mansis hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, the sadness that remains from their time as flesh. And finally, I am the librarian of Hush House, and I've made my determination. If you are considering a rose history, the first flower red determination is relevant, or if you're considering a sky history, origin from nowhere is relevant. Language is the key. It was language that opened the doors of the Mansis. Without language, we could have no peace. Without language, would still be beasts, worms, mud. So I think I'm going to experiment with something here. If I go to the white desk with Faust, I add Sacra Solis Invicti, the Old Lost Music, my journal, and result. Ah, we're still one short. All right. Should double check that there isn't a 10 sky, but oh ho ho! I'm glad I checked. All right, so
There's the From Nowhere origin. We we have the city unbuilt will rise in noon. This history is my last and excuse me, my last and greatest work. That old lost music will draw the birds, the names, the architects, and the adepts to noon across the evening sea. Or, as the magnate, it's I found my peace. That lost music will draw the birds, the names, the architects, and the adepts to noon across the evening sea. Okay. And then if I want a peek at the other one, which I believe we've already read, but this, by the way, is why I make the replacement ink, so I can do this kind of experimentation. So, to Ys Beyond the Wave, this history is my last and greatest work. Ys will be the city we've dreamt of, or Magnate Victory. I'll follow those songs to Ys Beyond the Wave, where I'll find my peace. Alright. Now, before we finish off, I need to level some things up. So my outside option is knock, so the real focus here is going to be weaving and knot working. I want to use up as much of the moth as I can. Yep, fair enough. Alright, when I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun and proved this skill to level 7. Now we should have enough time to be able to handle surgeries and exsanguinations. That'll obviously be in the next stream, but so we got 3, we need another 3. And that can come from knock, or that can come from or heart. So, we have the Stolen Secret. This doesn't give me heart. No knock or heart. We already have the pattern. Okay, so 4. Am I going crazy? Or am I missing one of these? Knock or heart? Secret threshold, stolen secret, pattern. Well, I can ping the Hush House key for this last one. I'm very scared that I didn't actually get the impulse. Oh wait, no, I don't need the impulse for surgeries and exsanguinations though, so And actually, honestly, we're close enough to getting this thing locked in. I might as well. I'll just do it. I know I've really lost the momentum for today, but I'll just cue this all. Rather than just give myself a to-do list, I should probably just get this done, and then we can move on. All right, the Mirror of Melisandre, the daybook and dream journal of Abbess Melisandre, venerated as a saint and respected as an alchemist. Melisandre speaks longingly of those who we would call from behind the sky. Melisandre claims that sights and sensations arts that she describes can be used to invoke the dream of a star when sufficient sky aspect is invoked to uplift an ascendant harmony. The Flayed Tantra. This Tantra is recorded as being spoken by the enigmatic individual identified as Peel, with many of the qualities of the mythological Naga. The Flayed Tantra played a notable part in Alexander Sparrow's paranoid pamphleteering. Peel was numbered among the great hooded princes, but it breaks with its brethren and followed the Thunderskin in the endless dance. Once Peel had peeled itself, it had the ink it needed to write the Tantra. It had to face the wrath of its fellows. Here is the invocation it used to fend them off. And Serena Blackwood herself forged this key. I am tired of losing it, she said. Memory lasts longer than an echo. Of course, when speech came into the world and we could cast echoes into words, things got more complicated. So, last but not least, surgeries and exsanguinations. At a core, when I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. So out of all of that, here is the plan for the next stream. So just a reminder that I will be at the local game dev meetup on Wednesday. So I'll be more. I probably will be. I'll be back on Friday most likely. So we've got the first flower. Or sorry, we've got the speech. Yeah, I'm actually also going to do the first flower. So that will be Moon, which I don't believe the old Lost Music gives me. So we'll try and use all the parts. This is Edge, Moon, Forge, okay, Edge. So old Lost Music doesn't do much for me here. So I'm going to want a Moon text so that I can make the... in that case, I would be deciding the black flower is the determination I'll make, the first flower. And then from there, I have, I think, a little bit of a dilemma between the origin of the scale or the sky. So one of them's origin from nowhere. I forget the scale one offhand. Technically, neither of those are necessary, but I always like having a full book of determinations. And then, of course, we're not going for a traditional ending. What we are going for is the Lighthouse Institute. So I'll still write a history, but I need to figure out exactly what my, what my intended Lighthouse Institute looks like, and perhaps a history that's appropriate for that. But of course, all of that will be handled in the future. I am reasonably happy. I'm going to call these HOL-F just because I was able to meddle with the behind the scenes. Like I was able to meddle with this one, but I don't want to delete any of the old saves just in case I mess something up. But again, all of that is for a future stream. Thank you again for everybody for hanging out. I realize the streams have been
a little lackluster lately, and I am really still trying to recover from the cough. Clearly, I still have it. But I do appreciate everybody hanging out and watching Book of Hours. Like I said, Wednesday I'm going to be at the local dev meetup. So Friday is the next time that I'll be able to stream. And then if I'm, for whatever reason, if I'm feeling sick, I do have a very busy week, and that does tend to result in less sleep, which of course can sometimes mean sickness gets worse rather than better. So, but I will be continuing on with this playthrough. If it turns out to be Monday, I'll feel terrible about it. But I will definitely still stream this all the way to the end. And of course, now we have more options for members of the Lighthouse Institute. I noticed that Katako is live. Now, she has been doing not speed runs, but no-hit runs through Resident Evil 2, the latest remake of it. Katako is an Australian streamer, definitely a lot of fun to hang out with. Actually has a daughter who's a bit interested in game development, which was a bit charming. But anyways, a streamer I've definitely liked hanging out with, somebody I found through Outworld's community, and somebody I feel a reasonably safe set of hands to leave you all on with. I believe she is playing as Leon this time. She got through Claire's run. But anyways, I'm off. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.